In a dimly lit room where the metallic clinks of replicated hands echoed eerily, a voice cried out in agony, cursing the searing pain. A boy sat injured on a bed, clutching his side with a furious expression, swearing vengeance through clenched teeth as he roared that he would kill every last one of them. The scene shifted to the Demon Lord's castle, where swords clashed in chaotic symphony and 6 heroes battled fiercely. Mid the struggle, a female warrior exclaimed in frustration that the Demon Lord stood right before them, but the others were overwhelmed, urging a retreat. The main hero, hearing her, suddenly realized something and called out to Akito-sama. She responded that they would hold off the guards and he should focus on the Demon Lord. Nodding with determination, he charged toward the enemy while the demon laughed mockingly. As an explosion erupted and the hero's sword flared with power, he steadied himself, muttered an apology, and plunged his blade into the demon, who screamed in disbelief at being defeated before vanishing. Breathing heavily, the hero stood victorious while his comrades rushed over, the girl calling his name. As they gathered behind him, he remained silent for a moment, then smiled and finally declared that they had won and peace would now return to the world. 1 month later, in the holy capital, a banquet in a guest mansion marked the 5th day of the hero party's celebration. Slumping onto a sofa, Akito groaned about the exhausting festivities as someone placed a glass on the table. Looking up, he nearly called out her name before she introduced herself as Flora, the saintess of the holy nation of the 5 great countries, land of God. She teased that she never expected the hero who conquered Pale Peak in a week would tire from a mere party. Akito grumbled, expressing his distaste for formalities. She leaned over the back of the sofa and reminded him that after tomorrow's joint victory ceremony, he would be free, encouraging him with a smile. He nodded as laughter approached and his comrades entered, one addressing him as Big Brother and urging him to cheer up. Akito responded warmly, reminding everyone they were the legendary heroes who saved the world. The speaker, Xiaolong of the martial nation, admitted he too disliked formality. Doug of the magic nation Marishia acknowledged Akito's immense contribution, while Shinonmi Nagi of the eastern nation Muashashi remarked on Akito's impressive solo duel with the Demon Lord. Akito modestly replied that it was not his strength alone, and that he could not have done it without them. As Garen Rudolph of the military empire Gaia arrived, Akito greeted him and questioned why no thanks were needed. Garen replied that they had merely followed orders, prompting Akito to express sincere gratitude for having met them. Rising to his feet, he thanked them all, and they smiled in return. Later, the mood turned light as Flora helped a laughing and tipsy Akito walk while Juan joked about his poor liquor tolerance. Shinonmi chided him for drinking while enjoying the local brew. Akito, still unsteady, told Flora to get a grip and not worry about tomorrow. She replied confidently that she would wake up on time. When Akito suddenly asked what everyone was doing after the ceremony, the room fell silent. Garen responded that he would return home to help his empire recover. Shinonmi planned to retire and focus on research. Doug intended to spread his martial art across the continent. Juan would return to the church, as would Flora. When they asked Akito about his plans, he hesitated, thinking that unlike them, he was reincarnated, his parents gone, and he had nowhere to belong. He finally answered that he would wander. On the ceremony day, inside a grand cathedral's waiting room, he questioned Flora about the elaborate attire. Flora reminded him that this was an important event symbolizing the unity of the 5 great countries and the peace he had brought. Reluctantly, Akito allowed her to prepare him. When he asked about the value of the armor, she revealed it was crafted from national treasures worth an entire country's budget, warning him not to damage anything. Inside the cathedral, people chanted and cheered for the holy envoy and messenger of God. Akito, confused, asked Flora who that was, and she revealed that it was him, shocking him further. She assured him it was only for formalities and asked him to bear it for the day. As they walked, Akito murmured that he would say goodbye once this ended. Calling Flora's name, he hesitated and then referenced their previous conversation about his future. He revealed he had thought about it all night and decided he wanted to travel the world, helping those still in need, and hoped to do so with her. Embarrassed, he asked if it was strange, but she smiled and called it a wonderful dream. Inside the cathedral, surrounded by clerics from across the world, Akito marveled at the ceremony's scale as Flora guided him to the altar and instructed him to remain still. Observing the intricate setup, he grew wary when Flora commanded the ritual to begin. Clerics crossed their fingers, and as a symbol on the floor glowed, chains suddenly erupted and bound Akito to the ground. He cried out in shock, realizing he could not move and deducing it was a trap involving massive mana and magical tools. Desperate, he called out to Flora, asking if she was safe and to warn the others. But as he looked up, she turned to him with a smirk, stunning him. She walked closer and remarked on his strength, calling him truly terrifying even while restrained. In pain, Akito asked if it was a joke, only to see Doug arrive. Calling out to him in disbelief, Akito demanded answers. Doug dismissed his concern, stating this was fate. Flora confirmed that everything was over, and Doug explained that Akito had become too powerful and now threatened the balance of the world. One by one, his former comrades appeared behind pillars, each justifying their betrayal. Shimon warned that favoring any nation would destabilize the balance. Garen announced the 5 nations had made a pact, and Juan declared that Akito had to be eliminated. Staggered, Akito asked how they could betray him after everything. Garen spoke of duty, Shimon of power being inherently evil, and Flora confirmed their betrayal with cold amusement. Akito shouted in rage, breaking chains with sheer power as blood dripped from the clerics' faces from the force. Doug cried out in disbelief as Akito began overpowering the group magic. Clerics screamed as Akito's wrath intensified, but Wen struck him from behind, slamming him into a pillar with explosive force. Doug scolded Wen for acting prematurely, though Wen noted Akito was still alive. Groaning, Akito opened his eyes and questioned why, only to be restrained again. Doug brought forth a box and announced they would now transfer Akito's 5 cheat skills into a ring. Flora questioned the feasibility, but Doug assured her, revealing they had gathered national treasures from all 5 countries and infused them with his ritual. Starting the process, he activated a seal and poured energy into Akito's body, which began to burn as Akito screamed, his nerves feeling as if they were being torn apart. The sweat from his body reached the ring, completing the ritual. Doug lifted the ring and confirmed their success. Flora asked what to do with Akito, and Doug proposed claiming he had returned to the heavens. Akito, enraged and broken, screamed that he had fought for humanity, only to be discarded and betrayed. Declared the 5 great nations his enemies. Wen mocked him while Doug instructed someone to end his misery. Shimon approached with a sword, but Akito, unable to move, began to laugh. Flora asked if the pain had driven him mad, but Akito replied that he had discovered one part of his body still functional. Suddenly, mana erupted from within him, triggering an overload. Doug realized Akito was about to self-destruct. Flora screamed for everyone to flee. Akito, pouring every last ounce of strength into his final act, declared he would take them all down with him. The cathedral exploded, the blast visible from afar as soil and debris clouded the sky. As the dust settled, Garen stood wearing the ring, prompting the others to approach. Doug noted Garen had already activated the ring and marveled at the cheat power's durability. Flora praised the plan's perfect success and tried to soothe tensions, but Garen criticized her hypocrisy. Shimon warned against threats, and Wen suggested a battle to determine the strongest. Doug intervened, warning that a fight would lead to global war. When laughed, Flora dismissed the tension, and she knelt, praying for divine blessings upon the future. The hero was gone. The explosion was publicly framed as divine aftermath, and the people believed the lies, all except the loyal followers Akito had once saved. Now in a quiet wooden house, a girl carried 2 buckets, calling out that she was heading to fetch water. Her master warned her to be careful. As she approached a river and filled the buckets, she muttered about the strange explosion the day before, only to spot a body beneath the trees. Screaming, she shouted for her master. Someone was out there. This was the beginning of Akito's revenge. Akito was trapped in a flashback, screaming as a voice cried out that they had agreed to take Big Bro Akito out. And Shimano declared too much power becomes evil itself, while Garen insisted everything was for the Empire and Doug muttered it was fate. Akito listened, his thoughts spinning in disbelief as he recalled how they had traveled together, how they had fought the demon lord side by side, wondering why they would betray him, why this was happening. He reached a trembling hand toward Flora, shouting her name and pleading that this had to be some kind of mistake, especially from her, stammering that he had really cared about her. Flora turned her face toward him and smirked coldly, and Akito's heart sank as she said, "Poor Akito-sama, to think you never realized we were using you until the very end." His eyes welled with tears as he thought he would never forgive them, that they had used him and taken everything. And with that he vowed again that he would never forgive, deciding that every one of those 5 nations, Astrads, were now his enemy. He swore he would get revenge no matter what it took, and screamed that he would kill them all, jolting awake with a start and scanning his surroundings in confusion, whispering, "What the hell, where am I? What is this place?" He saw himself lying in a bed and muttered that he was alive, then tried to get up but could not move, his own voice sounding foreign in his ears. A girl peeked nervously through the door and muttered crap, then dashed down the stairs and called out to her master that he was awake and in agony. The master responded that the painkillers had worn off, and the 2 hurried into the room, the master moving to hold him down while instructing the girl to force the medicine in. She complied with a firm "got it," and Akito struggled to gulp the bitter medicine, his mind racing in terror as he wondered what was happening, where the hell he was, and who these people were. After they finished, he coughed violently and gasped hack, while the master observed that he seemed to be calming down a bit. Akito's eyes dulled as he drew in a deep breath, then snapped open with urgency and glared at them, demanding to know who they were, what this place was, and how long he had been unconscious. The girl recoiled, shouting in frustration, "What kind of attitude is that? insisting that if they had not saved him, he would be dead, and he should at least introduce himself first. The master pulled her back calmly and explained that judging by Akito's expensive clothes and accessories, he was clearly someone of status, and given the situation, if he did not want to talk, they would not press him, adding that he had been washed up near the river, soaked in blood, and they had just happened to find him. This, he said, was his workshop. Akito stared at them, realizing they had saved him and not taken anything, concluding they did not seem like criminals. The master continued, introducing himself as Cress and the girl as his apprentice, noting that she had been the one who actually rescued him, so Akito should thank her and not him. He added that he would rather not deal with any trouble and would prefer if Akito left as soon as possible. Akito averted his eyes and muttered thanks, and Cress gave him a passing glance before saying fine. He would write a letter if Akito gave him a contact who could come pick him up. When Akito remained silent, Cress asked what was wrong and whether he had anyone. Akito hesitated before asking if he could stay a bit longer, promising to repay them, and saying he would leave on his own once he could move again. The girl looked at him in confusion, and Cress repeated stay here with a raised brow, questioning for how long and stating firmly that he was not a nursemaid. Akito frowned and asked what he was talking about, clarifying that he was not asking for 5-star treatment. Cress went quiet for a moment, then replied that Akito really had not noticed. The girl turned to Cress, calling his name and suggesting it was better he hear it now, that sooner or later he would have to know, though she hesitated and asked if they should wait until he was more stable. Akito shouted at them, demanding to know what they were whispering about, and Cress stepped forward, gripping the blanket, saying it was fine and that even if Akito panicked, he could handle it. He moved to pull the blanket back as Akito shouted again, insisting he be told what the hell they were talking about. When Cress finally pulled the blanket away, Akito stared in stunned silence, his breath caught as he realized his arms and legs were gone. His voice broke in confusion as he uttered huh, and his thoughts spiraled in horror. No, it's gone, my arms and legs, they're gone. He turned to Cress in disbelief, and Cress responded with grim finality that the damage had been too severe, and if they had not amputated them, Akito would be dead. Akito saw himself and let out a desperate scream, shouting why did this happen to me? While the master ordered hold him down, struggling to restrain him as Akito cried out for someone to tell him this wasn't real. His mind raced in panic, questioning why it had to end like this, wondering if he had blown the others away with the explosion, and if so, why the rest of his body remained intact. Then a dreadful thought hit him and he muttered, "No, don't tell me. Was it them?" As he glanced at his missing arm and was suddenly overwhelmed with nausea, vomiting violently as the master and the girl looked on in silent concern. Akito gasped out, Why am I the only one who has to suffer like this?" His voice cracking as he looked down, tears streaming, and whispered, "How the hell am I supposed to get revenge in this state?" Then broke down, begging them to just kill him already. The master grabbed him by the bandages and shouted, "You damn idiot. After all the trouble we went through saving your life. Don't throw it away," and Akito yelled back, "Shut up. What the hell do you know about my pain? Lose your arms and legs first, then preach to me. Don't look down on me from your high horse." Suddenly, the girl slapped him hard and signed to her master to calm down before grabbing Akito's face and turning it toward her, meeting his gaze with fierce resolve as she urged him to hold on, saying he was still alive and pleaded with him not to give up on living. Akito trembled, his voice low and bitter as he admitted, "Yeah, I'm alive, sure, but in this body, what kind of life am I supposed to have now?" The master crossed his arms thoughtfully and said, "This place is a workshop, right? Maybe it's not a coincidence I ended up here. Maybe it's fate." Akito blinked in confusion and noticed the master's mechanical leg, staring in disbelief as Cress revealed this was the workshop of a Magitech limb engineer and introduced himself again as Cress. Akito's eyes widened in awe at the realization, murmuring Magitech prosthetics, remembering how even before the Demon Lord's rise, the world had endured countless brutal wars. As weapons and magic evolved, the number of wounded soldiers surged, and desperate for manpower, the ruling powers had demanded that engineers like Cress develop ways to send broken soldiers back into battle. The engineers answered that call by creating steel prosthetics powered by the user's own mana, allowing those soldiers to move again. He realized that this was how Magitech prosthetics had been born, to literally reuse broken soldiers. The girl added with pride that her master was one of the leading experts in the field, prompting the master to scoff and tease her for talking big for an apprentice. Akito muttered that he had heard rumors prosthetics existed in this world, but never imagined they could function like real limbs. A fire lit in his eyes as he thought if he could use one, maybe he could stand again. He asked with urgency if he could move again with those limbs, and Cress noticed the determination burning in his expression. Akito then apologized for earlier and asked a single question, if he had limbs like Cress on all 4 points, would he be able to move freely? The girl immediately shouted no way, calling it insane, warning that Magitech limbs ran on mana and required precise control to operate, that even moving just one was difficult, and 4 at once was physically impossible. She added that the process demanded an enormous mana reserve, with some users ending up bedridden for life because the limbs drained their energy just by being worn. Cress also warned of the cost, stating that 4 limbs would be a fortune and they couldn't cover it. Akito replied that he understood, then glanced at his accessories and told them to sell everything, saying they were worth a fortune and on par with national treasures. The girl asked in shock if he was serious, if he truly meant it, and Akito shouted his plea with all the emotion he could muster, insisting he still had something he needed to do. He lowered his gaze, and both Cress and the girl looked at him, stunned by his resolve. The master sighed deeply and muttered, "Fine, I get it," but the girl snapped in disbelief, shouting, "Are you out of your mind?" Cress sat down and calmly said, "Iris, we saved him, that makes us part of this." She argued, but he explained that if Akito was still willing to take the risk, it had to mean something. Iris looked conflicted, acknowledging that even though he might lose everything again, he was still willing to fight. Akito declared that he had made up his mind, and she clenched her fists, growling, "Fine, fine, whatever," then shouted that she would help with the surgery too, claiming that since she was the one who found him, she would take responsibility. Akito smiled and agreed, saying that sounded fair. The master opened the door and paused, declaring that it was settled and left the preparations to them, but warned that it would not be easy. Akito met his gaze firmly and said he was ready. Iris called out to stop him, asking for his name, exasperated that they were helping him and still didn't even know who he was. Akito gave a sheepish smile and apologized, saying his name was Akito. She smiled faintly in return, thinking finally a smile, and Cress assured him they would do everything they could and asked him to trust them too. Akito nodded and thanked them, and so the surgery to install Magitech limbs began. By installing special plugs, a mana circuit could be formed, allowing limbs to be detached or replaced easily, making repairs simple if a part broke. First, metal fittings had to be embedded into the damaged areas to attach the Magitech limbs. No anesthesia could be used, but he endured. Eventually, fittings were implanted in all 4 limbs to reduce the risk of rejection, and they began with 1 limb at a time. The initial phase of the surgery was a success. Cress examined the new arm carefully and instructed Akito to try moving the training prosthetic. Akito, seated on a couch, nodded and listened as Cress explained to start with the right arm, and once accustomed, moved to the right leg, then the left leg, and finally the left arm, after which they would begin full-body coordination training. It turned out converting his entire body to Magitech limbs was harder than he thought. Akito asked how to move the limb, and Cress explained that if he wanted to move a finger, he needed to focus his mana into the corresponding pseudonerve, as the prosthetics relied on pseudonerves. Akito closed his eyes and thought Cress was right, sensing a strange connection between himself and the limb. Iris watched closely as Cress urged him to begin with a finger and to take it slow, using only a small amount of mana. Akito focused, visualizing the movement, and suddenly his entire arm launched backward, smashing into the wall and leaving a gaping hole. He shouted in shock, confused that he had only tried to move a finger but the whole arm had responded. Iris yelled out in alarm as the arm crashed to the floor, and Akito shouted again, panicking as Cress warned him to watch out, yelling that too much mana could kill them all. Akito stammered that he didn't mean to, that it just moved on its own, unable to understand what was happening. Cress muttered in disbelief that such power came from just a training arm. Iris rushed over and told Akito to shut it down already, while the master stared at him, murmuring to himself that this guy. Cress's eyes narrowed in awe and suspicion as he quietly wondered just who the hell this guy really was. His hand had broken off from the prosthetic, and as Akito sat on the couch, he muttered an apology. The girl stood beside him, arms crossed, scolding him sharply, asking if he even understood the meaning of restraint. He replied with genuine remorse, repeating his apology. Master stared at him in disbelief, muttering under his breath, trying to comprehend what kind of freak Akito was to break a Magitech prosthetic with sheer mana output. It was absurd. No standard prosthetic could withstand that. Approaching, he declared that standard-issue prosthetics couldn't handle his mana and that he'd have to craft a custom set. Akito lit up with hope, but Master added he'd be charging extra, and Akito would pay for the damage to the floor and wall as well. Akito groaned in defeat. The path to acquiring his Magitech limbs was pure torment. Now bedridden, the girl fed him spoonfuls of food, but he, lost in thought, didn't respond. When he finally grabbed the tray and tried to sit up in bed, he insisted she didn't need to feed him, just leave the food and he'd eat it himself. She snapped, asking what kind of person treated someone like a dog. The worst part for Akito was the helplessness. He couldn't do anything on his own, not bathe, go to the bathroom, eat, move, or even scratch an itch. It was a waking nightmare. But the cruelest suffering came from inside his mind, striking hardest at night or when rain fell. Screaming into the silence, he writhed from phantom pain, shouting that it burned. Pain surged in limbs no longer there, like lightning through bone, like glass underfoot. His brain misfired, pain followed, and no medicine worked. There was no cure. Biting into his blanket, he screamed, driven by the agony. Yet through clenched teeth, he vowed that this pain would be his fuel. It screamed at him never to forgive them. He would kill them all, even if it was the last thing he did. Iris listened quietly from outside his room, guilt washing over her for pushing the surgery so quickly. Training continued. He practiced with fake hands, trying to write, and a year passed. Eventually, he received his prosthetic legs. Standing with the help of a stick, he stared at the floor as Iris observed from behind. Suddenly, he jumped but collapsed, prompting her to rush over, scolding him for walking alone. Balancing on prosthetic legs required tremendous control. He apologized, explaining he just wanted to adjust to his new body quickly. Supporting him gently, she asked why he was in such a rush. He nodded silently. Master, meanwhile, was shoveling snow outside and later munched on something, surprised to learn Iris was 17. As they sat together outside at a table sharing snacks, Akito remarked on her age, shocked. She asked if he was saying she looked old, and he frantically denied it. She told him she was an orphan taken in by Master and that living with someone else was new for her. He apologized for being a burden, but she brushed it off, comparing him to a stray mutt they picked up. Confused, he asked what that meant, and she admitted that, strangely enough, she'd been enjoying herself lately. She paused, then quietly added maybe it was because of him. Panicking, he asked if he crushed the mood again. She laughed, thanking him for the cliché line. The seasons passed. Master continued working on Akito's limbs. 4 years later, in a field, Iris called out, asking if he was ready. He responded from afar that he was good to go anytime. She carried a basket of eggs, warning him dinner depended on his catch. He assured her, and she tossed the eggs into the air. With astonishing precision, Akito caught all of them, even catching one with his foot as it nearly fell. Impressed, she praised his skills. Master appeared from behind, observing with a prototype prosthetic. Akito looked at his hand, murmuring that he'd finally got the hang of it. Controlling it now felt like a video game, his Magitech body like a customized controller. It took his brain time to adapt, but now he was more precise than ever. Iris examined the basket, amazed that not a single egg had broken. Akito turned to Master and asked how he looked. Wasn't he ready for the real limbs now? Master agreed, saying it was time. They entered the workshop where a box held a completed leg. Master revealed his custom-built Magitech prosthetics. Akito shouted in disbelief, upset they were done this whole time and no one told him. Master admitted he had to test Akito's resolve. Confused, Akito asked what he meant, but Master said nothing and instead told Iris to fit the limbs. Once fitted, Akito marveled at how incredible they felt, exclaiming that it was insane how natural they were. He threw a punch that shattered a wooden beam and admired the strength and responsiveness. Master, proud, reminded him who built them. Then he passed the torch to Iris, assigning her the fine-tuning. She panicked at the responsibility, stammering that it wasn't what it looked like. Master teased that no one understood Akito better than her, so she was the perfect choice. She shouted back indignantly, and Akito, watching from the back, clenched his hand and thought that after 4 long years, he finally had his fangs. Let them enjoy peace while they could, because soon they would regret everything. A few months later, Akito and Iris walked through the town, arms full of supplies. Akito noted it had been a while since they strolled like this. She reminded him he'd been too busy training and tuning his limbs. Meanwhile, back home, Master lay sick in bed, coughing. Seeing him, Akito noted how rare it was for Cress to fall ill. Cress asked him to handle a delivery, and Iris confidently replied that they weren't kids anymore. In the present, they wandered the market and noticed a food stall. Iris pointed out the delicious smell and suggested they check it out. Akito dismissed it as a kid's errand, but then she called his attention to a statue. Confused, he looked at it carefully and realized it was indeed him. The armor and gear matched exactly. He questioned why there was a statue of him. A man behind them asked if they'd never heard of the Heroism Church. Akito, stunned, repeated the name. The man explained it was a group founded by those saved by the hero, honoring him like a god. Akito stood in stunned silence. The man went on to say the Heroism Church had branches in all 5 nations. Akito grabbed Iris's arm and told her they should leave, recognizing a sales pitch. But she found it all rather sad. The man added that everyone once stood united under Akito to defeat the demon lord, but now the nations were at war again. They wondered why Akito had abandoned them and ascended to the heavens. Even with the demon lord gone, monster attacks persisted while the nations did nothing, letting the borderlands fall into chaos. As they walked, Akito silently questioned whether he'd just been hiding in peace for 4 years like a coward. He asked aloud if they really did all that when something rustled in the bushes. He spotted movement and muttered that it looked like monsters. They shouldn't be this close to town. Iris hid behind him, saying she had a bad feeling. He agreed and told her to hold on as he lifted her onto his back, sprinting towards home. But the monsters reached their house first. Iris gasped that the workshop was under attack. Akito cursed under his breath, knowing Cress was inside. As rage surged, he launched himself into the air, shouting at Iris to get out of the way. He clashed with the monsters, unleashing his fury, cutting them down with newfound precision. They rushed into the room, calling out for Cress. But when they saw what had happened, Akito's eyes darkened. He should have realized it sooner. These were always the kind of people who took everything from him. Iris sat in the bath, pulling the chain as a bucket of water splashed over her head. As she slowly sank into the tub, her voice trembled, pleading for her master not to leave her behind. Meanwhile, Akito stood solemnly in front of Cress's grave, eyes closed, remembering the old man's final moments. Back when Akito was about to leave the room, he had asked if they shouldn't at least call a doctor, questioning if Cress really wanted to stay like this. Cress had simply answered that he knew when he was dying that these wounds couldn't be saved. Akito had hesitated, mentioning Iris, explaining that she'd rushed off in a panic to find medicine, desperate to stop her master from dying. Cress, coughing harshly, had called her a stupid apprentice for leaving at such a time. Akito had murmured through clenched teeth, wondering why this had to happen to Cress, if it was just bad luck or if it was somehow his fault. Cress had denied that, blaming the 5 nations for ignoring the monsters, insisting that if they had acted, this never would have happened. Then he had told Akito there was something he needed to say. Akito, assuming it was about Iris, promised to look after her. But Cress said it wasn't just about her. When Akito had first washed up there, Cress had never asked about his past, but he could see it in Akito's eyes, the look of a man driven by revenge, willing to sacrifice everything. That fire in him had made Cress hesitate to give him Magitech limbs, afraid that enabling his revenge might plunge the world into another war. Akito had laughed softly, realizing that was why Cress had tested his resolve so much. Cress admitted that even though he hesitated to the end, once he saw Akito and Iris working together, he knew they would finish what he started. Akito had nodded, saying that at this point, the gear was something they had created together. Cress had asked only one thing in return: to protect that idiot apprentice. With those final words, the old man had passed. Now, as Akito approached Iris at the grave, he called her name and told her they needed to talk. She stood up slowly, looking hollow as she whispered that this was too cruel. He told her everything, how he ended up there, and then asked if she believed him. She shouted back not to insult her, saying she had watched him for 4 years and knew he wasn't the kind of person to lie. And she asked what he was going to do now. He answered that he was going to get revenge. She asked if it was just to get his power back, and he admitted that was part of it, but mostly he wanted them to atone. When he explained that he couldn't stay with her and warned her it was dangerous to remain in the workshop alone, she yelled that she was going with him. He stared in disbelief and questioned her, but she fired back, asking who else could maintain his prosthetics. Stunned, he realized she had a point. No one but her could fix them. The limbs were one of a kind, powered by ideas he had brought from modern Japan, mostly inspired by anime and manga. Sitting at the table, he asked if she could make the arms stretch or fly off, maybe add boosters to the legs. She said they could try, and the build evolved into a fully loaded custom monster. He suggested he could just return to the workshop whenever something broke, but she snapped that revenge wasn't going to be that easy, and there was no other choice but for her to come along. Grumbling, he put a hand to his head, muttering an apology to Cress, knowing he couldn't face him like this. Finally, he gave in, admitting she was impossible to argue with. She cheered and said she'd start packing right away. Back at the house, while she busied herself, Akito reminded her not to run off on her own and to listen to him. If she died, it would all be for nothing. She shouted back that it was her line, saying he owed her, and that she wouldn't let him die after all the work she put into those limbs. He looked at her with a strange expression, realizing she had lost her only family too. She was grieving, but hiding it, trying to stay strong for him. He told her not to worry, that he'd pay back every cent he owed and wouldn't die until he did, and also he wouldn't leave her alone. She froze in surprise, then laughed when he glanced at her with one eye. She turned to him and said he better keep that promise. Akito smiled, remembering Cress's last request to protect her. Moving to the sofa, he promised again that he'd protect Iris no matter what. They packed their things, and when everything was ready, he looked around and said it was time. He pulled a curtain from the window to cloak himself, saying that from here on he would need to conceal who he was. She asked where they were headed first, and he replied that their first stop was the closest capital, Raku, where one of the 5 heroes, Xiaolong, resided. She nodded and said they should get moving. As they left the house behind, he thought to himself that somewhere out there, someone needed his strength, and if he could help even one of them, then maybe, just maybe, if it was with Iris by his side, he could find purpose again. In the martial capital of Raku at the city gates, desperate voices cried out as peasants begged the soldiers to open the gates. They pleaded for an audience with the king, swearing they would starve if left outside for the winter. The soldiers atop the wall shouted back, mocking them for making noise at such an hour. Panic spread through the crowd, but then someone approached from behind, scolding the soldiers for being too loud. Startled, they turned and saw who it was. Master Xiaolong had arrived. When told the peasants were demanding an audience, Xiaolong scoffed. Silence fell for a moment, then suddenly a spark ignited. A dragon descended, slaughtering the helpless people. Cries of horror echoed as someone screamed, asking what he was doing. Xiaolong casually muttered that finally there was peace and quiet. He looked up at the soldiers and ordered them to report this as stopping a rebellion before it started. The guards trembled before bowing, affirming that they understood perfectly. Xiaolong, one of the 5 heroes, walked away, murmuring not to mess with his beauty. Xiaolong, hero of the martial nation, after defeating the Demon King, became the martial instructor for the king's royal guard in the capital, Raku. As promised, he founded his own fighting style, and now his dojos are spread throughout the entire nation. 3 days after leaving Cress's workshop, Akito and Iris arrived at the town closest to their destination. This was the checkpoint leading to the capital, Raku, called Koru. But for a certain reason, they were stuck here. While eating their dinner, Iris glanced over and asked why they were blocked from entering. A travel permit? Of course, they didn't have one. Akito muttered that it made sense, considering the wartime restrictions. Iris stayed silent while Akito thought bitterly about his carelessness. They had confirmed Xiaolong was in Raku, but without ID or papers, they were stranded. He had assumed that once they got close, they could work something out. Now they couldn't even step inside the city. He cursed under his breath, trying to figure out how to get past the checkpoint. Iris suddenly asked how he planned to get his powers back. He explained that his cheat ability had been sealed into rings by dues, each ring holding a different part of his power. He remembered the ritual clearly, the searing pain etched in his mind. Iris wondered if each one of them wore a ring and if destroying them might return his powers. Akito said it was hard to say, but either way, they needed to retrieve those rings first. Nearby, a group of rowdy men burst into laughter, annoying the waitress who politely asked them to quiet down. One of them mocked her with a sarcastic laugh. Akito paused mid-sentence, his irritation growing. Iris scoffed, saying that kind of behavior killed her appetite. Another table whispered about hunters, warning not to make eye contact with those freeloaders. Akito glanced at them, murmuring that those were hunters. He recalled how the hunter profession had risen to prominence after the Demon King was defeated. They were now essential, paid to take down monsters and escort civilians through dangerous zones. As a privilege, they were exempt from border and checkpoint inspections. Akito suddenly stood, wiped his mouth, picked up his glass, and approached the hunter's table. Iris shouted in alarm, demanding to know what he was doing. One of the hunters looked up, puzzled, and asked what his deal was. Akito replied coolly that they looked like they were having fun and asked if he could join. Shock spread across the tavern. The hunters laughed, amused by his boldness, and invited him in. Iris screamed in disbelief, but Akito remained calm, saying he just wanted to ask something. He inquired how to become a hunter. The hunter laughed, told him he wouldn't survive, and dismissed him as a scrawny brat. As they started to leave, Akito declared that if that's how they were judging people, then he was qualified. They stopped. Akito added that he was stronger than them, so if he was a wimp, they were too. One of the hunters snapped, trying to punch him, but Akito dodged easily, drawing the tavern's attention. The crowd shouted for a fight. The hunter called Akito fast and cursed him. His friends grew frustrated that they couldn't land a single hit. Iris watched in awe, unable to believe his fluid, almost inhuman movements. She thought about the name for Akito's custom magic prosthetic. It wasn't just a prosthetic anymore. She would call it a special feature beyond anything else, a Magitech frame core. Akito effortlessly avoided every strike, causing one hunter to accidentally hit another. Realizing his mistake, he cursed. Another hunter drew his sword, shouting that he would kill Akito. Iris gasped in shock. Just before the blade could be drawn, a commanding voice from behind stopped them. "Garkins, enough. Put your sword away." The hunter turned in surprise, recognizing the man. "Mr. Gald?" He apologized to the shopkeeper for the mess and offered to cover the damages. The hunters backed down immediately, mumbling that he stopped them with a single word. Clearly, he was strong. Gald approached Akito and offered a sincere apology, to which Akito responded that he wasn't hurt. Iris, still annoyed, pointed out that Akito had picked the fight. Gald smirked and said that as an apology, since Akito wanted to be a hunter, he might be able to help. Akito smiled, ready to follow. Upstairs, they sat at a table, with Iris seated and Akito standing before Gald. Gald asked if it was true they wanted to go to Raku but had no permit. Akito confirmed it, explaining his idea to use a hunter license. Iris, chewing her food, murmured that this was Akito's plan all along. Akito asked if it was really that easy. No tests or anything. Gald admitted that the organization was new and terribly understaffed. The kinds of people they were hiring said a lot. But Akito was clearly skilled. His calmness in the face of aggression had proven that. Gald handed him an envelope, explaining that his recommendation would be enough. Just bring the note to the guild and take a job. Akito gratefully accepted and asked how Gald could tell he was skilled. Gald replied that only someone strong could stay calm in that situation. He had let the fight go on as a test, and Akito had surprised him. On their way out, Gald asked if that was Xiaolong style Akito used. He was skilled. Where had he trained? Akito remained silent, remembering that he had trained under Xiaolong himself. The next day at the Martial Nation Hunter Guild branch, a cheerful man greeted them. Rugeles, a traveling merchant, thanked them for accepting his escort request. Due to circumstances, he could only pay half the usual reward, and he hadn't expected anyone to accept it. Iris pulled Akito aside, furious that it was so cheap and accusing him of dodging his debt. Akito calmly replied that it was the only mission available for rookies heading to Raku. Rugeles overheard and began to despair, saying he'd have to go alone and accept death if they canceled. Iris, seeing his fate sealed, immediately changed her tone and declared they'd protect him with their lives. Akito sighed, thinking this wouldn't be easy. Suddenly, a voice called out. The hunters from yesterday had returned. They surrounded him, intent on finishing what they started. Akito looked at them silently. Moments later, the three of them were on the floor, unconscious. He walked away, thinking it was good he hadn't used his full strength in a real fight against humans yet. Everything checked out. One of the hunters groaned, asking why Akito hadn't finished him off. Was he trying to show mercy? Did he think he was a hero now? Akito grabbed him by the collar and growled that he had originally planned to steal their licenses to get into Raku, but their boss had changed his mind. A hero. He hated heroes. If the man wanted to live, he should never say that word again. Iris, carrying a box, called out to Akito, saying they had finished loading everything. Akito joined her, apologizing and saying he had forgot something at the inn. She scoffed, reminding him they had bad guys to punish. A voice asked if they were ready. Akito confirmed. The man nodded and declared it was time to move out. As Akito sat in the back, he thought to himself, bad guys, huh? The 5 heroes were some of the worst monsters alive. He would lose in a fair fight, so instead he would become an even bigger villain. He wouldn't stop, not until he wiped those smug looks off their faces, even if it meant falling from hero to villain. They were traveling in a horse cart, as Iris said it was so peaceful out there. The driver remarked that traveling through different towns like this actually sounded pretty fun, and that maybe being a merchant wasn't so bad. Akito responded that was one of the perks for sure. But lately, monsters had been on the rise, so it had been tough to relax, and he really appreciated their help this time, counting on the 2 of them. The driver addressed them respectfully, calling out Miss Iris and Mr. Kyuju, which made Iris snap back in surprise and ask why he had registered under a name like Kyuju, accusing him of choosing something unnecessarily shady. Akito retorted that he wasn't about to register with his real name because that would be reckless, and explained that Kyuju was a surname from his past life. The driver observed that it was a rare name and asked if he was from the Far East, maybe the Musashi. Akito hesitated and muttered something like that, thinking to himself that it probably just made him stand out even more. The driver shifted topics and asked if it was really true that monsters were on the rise. Akito confirmed it was, unfortunately, and added that luckily only C-rank monsters showed up along this route. The driver acknowledged that even a C-rank was a deadly threat to a merchant like him. Akito raised an eyebrow and commented that the driver knew quite a bit. The driver explained it was because he had been reading the monster encyclopedia. Akito asked in disbelief if they actually published something like that now, murmuring that 4 years ago when he was active, that kind of thing didn't exist. The driver held up a book and explained that the Hunter Guild sold it, and that having monster knowledge could make all the difference. Akito asked if he could take a look, and the driver permitted him. As Akito flipped through the book, he murmured that the world had really moved on while he was gone. Iris leaned over to glance at it as well, exclaiming with interest that it even had illustrations and called them cute. Akito turned the page and read that D-rank monsters appeared in low magic zones and were relatively weak. C-rank were tougher but manageable alone. B-rank required a party to defeat. A-rank monsters or demons required full raids, and S-rank were commanders under the Demon King capable of bringing catastrophe to mankind. Akito sat atop the cart, still reading intently. Iris observed this and commented that he was reading that pretty intensely. He gave no response. The driver chuckled and suggested maybe it was nostalgic for him. Iris questioned the idea of nostalgia, while Akito quietly read, murmuring that the monster really had been an S-rank, which explained its strength, and wondered how the guild had even figured that out. From behind, Iris called out to him, reminding him that he was on guard duty and demanding he get over there. He didn't respond, irritating her as she grumbled about his weird cool guy act ever since they left town. Suddenly, the driver shouted out in alarm that something was approaching. It was a horned rabbit, a C-rank monster, and it was charging straight at them. The driver panicked and shouted for someone to do something. Iris screamed that it was his job. The rabbit leapt towards Akito, who still sat calmly, but in an instant he drew his dagger and cut them down without even giving them a chance to attack. Iris saw this and praised his move, saying she got the mana core and thanked the bunnies. Driver, stunned, said Akito had taken out 2 C-ranks in an instant without even looking. Iris told Akito to keep it up, collect more cores, and pay off his debt. Akito read aloud that the mana core was the nucleus of a monster's body, and removing it caused the body to collapse. He continued that mana cores had high magic conductivity, and were used in magical crafting to create conductive materials. Magi limbs used silver fused with mana cores in their circuitry. They also stored mana and powered various Magitech devices. The driver looked around and said that things seemed under control for now and urged them to keep moving. They stopped at certain points to eat and relax while Akito remained absorbed in the book and Iris tended to her tasks. Later, they slept together under the stars. Their journey continued until one day, as they traveled, Akito stepped in front of the cart and asked what the hell that was. The driver guessed it was a herd of horned rabbits, but Akito told him to look up in the sky behind them. Suddenly, an eagle swooped down in a surprise attack, shocking everyone. The driver shouted in panic as the eagle landed on the back of the cart. The horse panicked, and the cart began to move uncontrollably. The driver screamed that it was an A-rank monster, a griffin, and questioned why something like that would appear in a low magic area. Akito observed calmly that it wasn't targeting them, but rather the rabbit swarm. The driver countered that it was clearly locked onto them now, and that there was no way they could handle it without an entire battalion. He declared they were doomed. The griffin extended its sharp talons toward them, but Akito focused, jumped, and kicked its paws, making it land. He then leapt onto the griffin's back, mocking it by asking what was wrong and whether it was the first time someone had gotten the drop on it. The griffin screamed as Akito pulled a rope from his belt and launched it over the beast, tying it tightly before forcing it to the ground and shouting for it to fall. Iris and the driver stared, mouths agape. Later, they reached their destination. The driver, relieved, thanked them and said that thanks to the two of them, he would make it to the Merchant Guild on time and close his deal. He admitted he still couldn't believe his eyes that Akito had repelled a griffin in one blow. Iris corrected him, saying technically it got away, while Akito remained silent. The driver asked just who they were anyway, since they didn't seem like ordinary bodyguards. Iris and Akito looked at each other and then pointed at each other. Iris claimed they were just a debt-ridden rookie hunter and Akito called her a loudmouth apprentice engineer. The driver looked confused. As they walked away with their gear, Iris lamented the waste of the griffin's core, saying it had been priceless. Akito replied that they didn't have a choice and that reaching Raku was their top priority, and they couldn't afford any more delays. She stopped and asked if that meant his debt repayment was a waste of time now. He brushed it off and urged her to keep going. They looked up as Akito smiled, saying that after all that chaos, they had finally arrived at Raku. Elsewhere, Xiaolong sat atop a mountain of dead monsters while an A-rank griffin knelt beside him, its body dismantled. A creature that required an entire battalion to hunt had been taken down barehanded, a feat either divine or inhuman. This, the griffin thought, was the power of the 5 heroes. Xiaolong yawned and called it a snooze fest, then kicked a servant after the cart they were unloading tipped over. Xiaolong shouted that the Flame Nation King had sent him all the way out here for that pathetic task. He ordered Krosh to rip the mana core out. Turning to the griffin, Xiaolong told him it was time to blow off some steam and demanded a top-tier girl be brought to his quarters. The griffin asked again, and Xiaolong specified he wanted a married woman. The griffin asked in confusion if he meant a married woman, and Xiaolong confirmed with a grin and added to make sure they brought the husband too. The griffin stayed silent. Xiaolong asked what he didn't get, then smirked as he remembered what happened with Akito 4 years ago and muttered that stealing what someone else treasures the most was the best feeling. Back in Akito's training days, he had fallen during a lesson and Iris had caught him, shouting that it was dangerous and reminding him not to rush since he was still learning. Akito apologized, saying she had saved him. She told him to always move slow and steady and to drill that into his head. Some days later, while walking with the help of wheeled supports, Akito approached Iris as she stood in place. Iris noticed and grew flustered as Akito thought his heart couldn't take it. She turned to face him, apologized, and offered to move. Akito told her to wait. She reminded him of her earlier advice, looked at him, and repeated that when he moved, he should move slowly. Their master stepped out and saw them standing there under the daylight, wondering aloud what the heck they were doing and thinking maybe Iris and Akito were getting closer. They reached the city gates and handed over the envelope. When the guard examined it, Akito remained silent. The guard narrowed his eyes and asked if he was a hunter and what business he had there. Akito calmly stated he was there for work, sent by Gald, and presented a letter of recommendation. The guards, recognizing the name, gave a brief nod and allowed them through. As they walked on, Iris glanced back and remarked that someone clearly didn't like him. Akito responded that despite that, Gald was clearly well connected. Entering the city, they were greeted by a bustling view. Iris marveled at the crowd, saying she had never seen a city this big before. With the Flame Nation housing a population nearing 20 million, the largest among the 5 great nations, and this being its capital, it was no surprise the place was so lively. From a nearby stall, a vendor shouted energetically, urging people to try the local specialty, flame-fried meat buns, tasty and cheap. Iris started to run toward the scent before Akito caught her by the arm, holding her back as the vendor continued calling out, promising fresh and hot servings. Iris pouted and told Akito to let her go, but he reminded her firmly that they weren't there on vacation. First, they needed to go to the guild to collect the reward, then find an inn. She groaned and sat on the ground in protest while Akito tugged her along. Eventually, they arrived at a place that made Akito narrow his eyes. It was Xiaolong's style dojo. Memories of betrayal and the time Xiaolong struck him came flooding back, stirring a deep anger. He stood frozen, glaring as a dog inside barked and an eagle above the ceiling screeched. Iris, sensing something, called his name. He stepped forward, fists clenched, until she shouted for him to snap out of it. He looked down and muttered that he knew Xiaolong was probably not there. Iris glanced at the ground in silence as Akito said his first priority was gathering information. They began asking around. At a wooden shop, a man scoffed when asked about Xiaolong's whereabouts, replying that a hero like that didn't mingle with commoners. Another person said rumors suggested Xiaolong sometimes visited martial arts schools across the country or went on monster hunts at the king's request, but he was rarely in Raku. Later, they rested in a small hotel where Akito sat in contemplation, realizing Xiaolong wasn't based in the city. He admitted that if he'd stormed the dojo earlier, he might have triggered its security and gotten himself exiled. He thought Iris had inadvertently saved him from that mistake. But revenge wasn't his only goal. He needed Xiaolong to talk about the ring too. That meant a one-on-one encounter, somewhere private with no interference. He considered sneaking into the royal castle where Xiaolong lived in a private room and striking while he was asleep. But he quickly dismissed the idea as too risky. If he failed once, the security would tighten and he'd never get another shot. Instead of going to Xiaolong, he concluded he needed to lure him out. He believed it wasn't impossible. He understood how Xiaolong thought, impulsive, arrogant, addicted to battle. Someone like that couldn't stand knowing a stronger fighter was out there. He would always take the bait. Akito grabbed a quill and began scribbling, imagining Xiaolong's reaction to mocking posters. He drew a beaten, exaggerated face with captions like weakling, coward, sobbing, and challenged Xiaolong to face him alone. Smiling with satisfaction, Akito muttered it was perfect. Xiaolong wouldn't be able to ignore this. Just as he was about to declare his plan, Iris appeared behind him and slammed his head into the table, shouting that he was an idiot and asking who would fall for such a childish challenge. Akito tried to protest, saying Xiaolong might actually come, but she yelled over him, demanding how he knew Xiaolong would show up alone. He admitted that was true and asked what they should do instead. Iris remained quiet, then stared at him thoughtfully, thinking that most of the time Akito was calm and rational. But when it came to revenge, his intelligence dropped to goblin level. Akito grumbled under his breath as she reflected further, noting how he completely lost sight of everything around him. She murmured that maybe that reckless side was part of his charm, then quickly coughed and announced that she had gathered some information. When he looked at her with surprise, she shouted that she had been invited to join a female hunter's party, and they had taught her about Raku's customs and culture. He asked suspiciously if she hadn't just been goofing off. She reassured him she had also been gathering intel and had found out about a major upcoming event. He opened the invitation she handed him and asked what it was. She explained that it was the Flame Nation's Grand Summit Tournament, an annual martial arts competition hosted by the royal family. It originated from a legendary duel between two warriors who served the first Flame King, and the victor was honored with a royal feast. There were no entry requirements. Akito asked what the point of joining such a tournament was. She told him the event had been suspended during the Demon King crisis, but one person had won it 5 years in a row. That person was Wen Xiaolong. Akito's eyes widened as she explained this 5-win streak hadn't happened in over 100 years, and that if he won this next one, he would set an all-time record. Rumor had it he was definitely going for it. Akito thought to himself that knowing Xiaolong, he would enter for sure. He lived for titles and glory. Iris added that if he could face Xiaolong directly in the tournament, it would be his best shot at getting the ring back, and at the very least, Xiaolong would be in the city during the event. Akito began to laugh, confusing Iris. He declared that a hero showing himself so publicly was incredibly convenient. Scratching his head, he thought choosing Xiaolong as his first target had been the right call. Iris observed him with a mixture of concern and curiosity. And so, with everyone chasing their own goals, the Flame Nation's greatest event prepared to unfold. The Grand Summit Tournament was about to begin. In the city, fireworks exploded so loudly that Akito, watching them through the window, muttered to himself that no wonder it was so loud, shaking his head and thinking how wild it all seemed, remarking on the massive crowd and how he hadn't expected the event to be this enormous, noting how they had been partying since before sunrise. He turned to look back at Iris and asked in surprise if she was already up, scolding her that staying up late would kill her, to which she shouted sarcastically, wondering whose fault that was. then sighed and questioned seriously if he was really going to enter looking like that. Glancing at his mechanical hand, Akito blinked and asked if she meant this, stating that he had not much choice and that it was a last-minute call. Iris warned him flatly that it was made of nothing but sane-forced wires, and compared to the Magitech limbs, it only had a third of the power and durability. He waved her concern off, insisting it was just the qualifiers anyway, and if he could not get through them with these limbs, there was no way he would beat Xiaolong. She warned him sternly not to break them, reminding him that even as spare part patchwork, it was worth enough to buy a house. He smirked and said it would make for a good handicap. She stayed silent, thinking with exasperation if he was seriously asking her to rebuild the Magitech limbs from scratch now. Last night, when she was holding the parts, she had yelled at him in disbelief, asking if he was out of his mind and how he expected her to build all that before tomorrow's match, especially after looking at how many blueprints there were. When he asked if it was impossible, she had screamed that she wanted to know why he thought it was even possible. He admitted that without his cheat, Xiaolong probably had the edge in combat power, and the update was coming on July 16, adding that if he went in like this, he would not win and he needed the power of new Magitech limbs. As they sat talking, he stated that he would handle the qualifiers with his current prosthetic, but for the finals in 3 days, he needed the new model ready. She exclaimed that 3 days was madness and asked if he was kidding, but he leaned in and told her to listen. And she looked confused. He explained that projects did not get finished because of the deadline, but because there was a deadline, the project got done. She shouted that it was such a toxic mindset. He rose and walked toward the window, declaring that in that sense he was rooting for her and heading out. She turned toward him from her chair and shouted for him to wait, but he simply turned his head and told her he was counting on her, saying that whether he beat Xiaolong or not, it was in her hands now. She blushed, fell silent, turned back to the table, and began working on the hand while humming softly, declaring with determination that she would build the absolute best piece he had ever seen, challenging him to just wait. In the stadium, the event began with drums pounding to grab everyone's attention as a girl host announced that the summit arena of the Flame Kingdom was underway, energized by the crowd and proclaiming herself fired up too. As commentator, she introduced the day's qualifier as a sudden death free-for-all with over 100 contestants per stage battling for a spot in the main event. She highlighted the presence of the Flame King himself and the nation's beloved hero, Xiaolong, who as last year's champion had automatically earned his place, questioning whether he would claim his 6th consecutive win. At the entry gate, a staff member handed out the entry forms, telling Akito that he would be split into groups of over 100 for the qualifiers, and that each group would fight until only one remained, with the survivors moving forward and the top 16 facing off in the final tournament where one winner would rise above the rest. Akito confirmed that magic was mostly banned, to which she replied affirmatively, explaining it was a martial arts tournament after all. He inquired about Magitech limbs, and she assured him they were totally allowed, stating that even if they ran on mana, prosthetics were considered part of the body and many past fighters had used them. Akito observed that it made sense historically. She informed him that weapons and armor were allowed, but all blades had to be dulled, and anyone caught deliberately trying to kill would be banned for life. As he filled the form, he muttered that banned for life was honestly a pretty lenient rule, thinking to himself that if someone never planned on returning, then even spilling blood in the finals was fair game. Akito chuckled quietly, causing a nearby girl to murmur that he was creepy and wonder if all martial artists were like this. She handed him his badge number, and as he read it, he murmured Group D number 30. A guard standing nearby noted his group and sighed, remarking that it was tough luck, and that every year the biggest names just happened to end up in the same group, calling it synchronicity, and stating that this year's Group D looked especially brutal. Pointed out a man standing far away and told them to see for themselves, introducing him as mercenary Phone, skilled but the type who would do anything for money. And on the battlefield, he had skewered dozens with that lance of his like trophies, which was why they called him Impalement Phone, warning Akito to do himself a favor and drop out because Phone saw the tournament as one big murder show. Phone, overhearing this, looked forward and muttered that it was a piece of trash, then walked past them. The guard called for all contestants to gather in the center of the stadium. The referee announced the beginning of the D-Group qualifier and instructed all contestants to attach their numbered badge to their chest, warning that losing their badge or falling out of bounds meant disqualification, and only survivors would advance to the main tournament. One contestant panicked aloud, questioning if they were really supposed to fight with that many people, calling it nuts. The referee reminded that intentional killing would result in immediate disqualification. Phone stood silently against the crowd and thought to himself that basically one just had to avoid getting caught, then wondered how many he could take out in the chaos. Akito stepped forward and suggested they move to the center, noting that the edges were a death trap. Other contestants yelled at him to stop pushing and questioned his odd behavior, asking if he was trying to throw the match by heading toward the edge. Akito calmly replied that he did not want to waste energy on the qualifiers and would make it quick. As the others looked on in confusion, the referee shouted that Group D's match was now beginning. As everyone started fighting with their weapons, Akito suddenly dashed through the chaos. One onlooker pointed out in shock that the guy's arm was gone, then noticed something and shouted in disbelief, asking what that was. As they looked up, they noticed a rope tied to his wrist. Another contestant yelled that it was a rope and wondered what was going on. As the chaos continued, Griff silently watched from the stands while someone shouted that the contestant was pulling a string around the arena. Akito slid across the ground, muttering that it should be enough, and threw the rope to a pillar across the arena. Just then, a massive man came at him from behind, yelling angrily for him to stop wandering like an idiot, but Akito kicked him square in the face, grabbed his large axe with one hand, and remarked that it was perfect timing. He struck a stone with the axe, pulling more of the rope tighter around the arena, then grabbed the corner firmly. Griff watched as confused spectators realized that the rope was circling the stage like a tripwire. As panic spread, the contestants all got tangled together in a scramble, cursing and shouting in confusion, realizing too late they were being pulled. Akito released the rope, causing everyone to be flung into the air while the shocked host screamed in disbelief that the entire D group had just been thrown off the stage, then noticed that one guy was still standing. Akito's mechanical hand returned to him as the host declared that somehow contestant number 30 had advanced to the main event. In the VIP seats, the king laughed and asked who that guy was, prompting Xiaolong to ask Kaku for his name. Kaku replied that he seemed to be registered as Kyuju. Xiaolong, peering through his hand to get a closer look, muttered that Kyuju was a weird name but brushed it off, claiming he would forget it soon enough. Phone, also tossed from the arena, muttered in disbelief that Akito was the only one to qualify from his group as Akito stood alone, advancing to the main tournament. On day 2, nearly 6,000 contestants had been filtered through the qualifiers, and only 16 elite fighters remained. The host stood in the center of the arena, shouting that it was day 2 of the Magitech tournament and the bracket battles were beginning, declaring that only 2 would earn their place in the finals and revealing the matchups. Among the crowd, Akito's gaze scanned the board until it froze upon a familiar name, his eyes widening in disbelief as he muttered Xiaolong under his breath. His expression darkened, anger clenching his fist before he murmured to himself to calm down, reminding himself that Xiaolong was on the opposite side of the bracket, and if they fought, it would be in the finals tomorrow. He reassured himself that the Magitech arm wasn't finished yet, and if he wanted to win at full power, it wasn't time yet. Determined, he resolved to hold back for now. The scene shifted to Xiaolong, who looked down at the bracket before walking over and placing a hand on Kaku's shoulder, calling out to him with a grin and commenting on the lucky draw. Kaku, confused, asked what he meant, and Xiaolong elaborated that the bracket clearly favored them since they wouldn't meet until the finals, claiming that Xiaolong's style could sweep the whole tournament and that it would be great publicity. Kaku responded with realization and a nod, while Xiaolong proposed putting on a real show for the crowd in the finals. Kaku scoffed that he wasn't exactly ready to die just yet. Suddenly, the Flame King called Xiaolong, reminding him that this tournament was a matter of national pride with 5 great nations watching, and even the slightest chance of losing was unacceptable. Xiaolong offered a strange smile, turned to the king's throne, sat on the chair's arm, and told him to relax, claiming he was just joking and would follow the rules, warning the king not to get worked up or he would raise his blood pressure. He arrogantly added that half the nation's power was thanks to him, and if he lost, the other nations would pounce instantly, so the king should just stay seated and warm the throne. As he walked off, he demanded a reward and plenty of women, calling Kaku to follow. The king remained silent. The first match was called, pitting the masked Prince Kick Karasu against Kyuju. The host shouted with excitement as the match began, mocking that fighting bare-handed was an insult. Kick launched a massive punch at Akito, but Akito calmly caught his fist with one hand, stopping him in place. Kick stammered in disbelief before Akito folded his arms and slammed him to the ground in a single move, rendering him unable to continue. The host declared Kick Karasu defeated and Kyuju the winner. In the second match against Iron Thorn's Rose, the host excitedly remarked that Kyuju's arm clearly had some trick to it, and that if Rose avoided that arm, he should be fine. As Rose aimed a strike at Akito, Akito simply sidestepped and raised his knee. Rose's sword shattered against his leg, shocking him, and Akito apologized dryly, revealing that his legs were custom too. Rose screamed that it wasn't fair to cover his whole body in armor and that it lacked honor, to which Akito smirked and responded that he wasn't one to talk. Rose unsheathed another sword and declared he had been saving it for the finals, revealing the sacred sword Almelia, a gift from Grand Commander Baron Garen, shouting for Akito to face it now. Without hesitation, Akito slapped him so hard he collapsed, and the host announced that Rose was unconscious and Kyuju had won again. The crowd began to murmur, noting that the Magitech guy was surprisingly skilled and not just relying on cheap tricks, calling him a dark horse who might make it far. They pointed out that his next opponent would be Kaku, a disciple of the Xiaolong style, always overshadowed by Xiaolong but still a top-tier martial artist. As they spoke, Xiaolong arrived, drawing cheers. The host began shouting that match 3 of round 1 featured single-blade styles Thosi Takashi against the founder of Onatovic style, the hero Wan Xiaolong. The roar of the crowd thundered through the arena, a testament to Xiaolong's popularity, though the host admitted not understanding the hype. Xiaolong waved casually to the crowd while Azumi watched silently from the sidelines. Akito observed him from among the spectators, noting the terrifying aura surrounding him and wondering who he was. Azumi demanded the referee start the match, annoyed by the delay. The referee hesitated, but as Azumi stepped forward, he struck Xiaolong just as the referee called the match to begin. Xiaolong stepped back and easily defended, prompting him to think with mild surprise. Akito noticed the glint of the blade and thought in alarm that the sword was real. Azumi shouted in fury, and Xiaolong asked the referee to stand down unless he wanted to die, claiming things had just got interesting. He admitted he didn't know how Azumi had gotten a real sword in but noted the bloodthirsty look in his eyes and asked if he was a hardcore fan. Azumi, seething, demanded if Xiaolong had truly forgotten, accusing him of defiling and murdering his wife, revealing himself as Azumi of the Musashi Nation, seeking vengeance. Xiaolong raised his pinky finger and claimed he had no idea what Azumi was talking about. Azumi declared that he would make him remember in his final moments and apologize to his dead wife, vowing to avenge her, stating he had trained under Lord Shinnome for this moment. Xiaolong tried to recall and muttered about an Eastern woman with a left braid and fluttery features. As Azumi charged, Xiaolong caught the blade with just his pinky, stunning everyone. Azumi stood frozen in disbelief, unable to comprehend what had happened. Xiaolong smiled as Azumi launched an ultra-chi burst from a different angle, but Xiaolong continued to defend with only a finger. This was one of the 5 cheat abilities Akito had lost, the grace of strength. With enough mana, the user's skin hardened like steel, vision extended for miles, and all poison or paralysis was neutralized when focused on vitality. It converted 100% of internal mana into physical power. Akito had once used this ability alongside his vast mana pool to lift boulders weighing dozens of tons. Xiaolong admitted he did not possess that kind of mana, but with precise control of output, he could perform tricks like this. He stopped another strike with only his knuckle, opened his fingers, and sent Azumi staggering back. With a twisted grin, Xiaolong finally remembered, casually mentioning an Eastern woman who resisted until he drugged her into submission, calling her the best one by far. Azumi screamed in rage, calling him a sick bastard, and rushed forward, but Xiaolong merely tapped his stomach with a single finger, sending him flying across the stage and smashing into the ground with such force that the floor cracked. The host gasped, calling it a shocking development and announcing that Xiaolong's single blow had sent Azumi flying. Xiaolong turned to Kaku and ordered him to get rid of Azumi later, warning that if rumors spread, it would be a mess. Kaku nodded in understanding. Suddenly, a stomp echoed through the arena, drawing Xiaolong's gaze to its source. He turned and saw Akito standing calmly beside Azumi's broken form, resting a hand on his shoulder. Xiaolong narrowed his eyes and muttered with annoyance, demanding to know who the hell that was. The host, seeing the unexpected scene, shouted in disbelief, asking what was happening and confirming that the contestant was P30 Kyuju, who had suddenly leapt onto the stage. He wondered aloud if Kyuju had been trying to help Azumi. Akito, staring intensely at Xiaolong, clenched his jaw and thought to himself that he had heard everything about what Xiaolong had done. Xiaolong noticed Akito's expression and scowled, muttering that he didn't like that look one bit. Keck, standing beside him, questioned if Lord Xiaolong knew that man or if he had made yet another enemy. Xiaolong brushed it off, scoffing that although he flirted with women, there was no way he would be involved with some mutt-turd stray, though a flash of recognition crossed his face as he recalled having seen him before by the river. Akito, his anger barely contained, identified him internally as the bastard from 4 years ago, deciding that this would end today. Xiaolong dismissed it with indifference, saying he might as well take out the trash while he was at it, and declared that he would go first. The host protested, shouting that the match couldn't start without permission, but was abruptly interrupted as Azumi suddenly stood up. The host, startled, announced that Azumi was back on his feet, though the match had already seemed to conclude. With shaky breath, Azumi declared his intent to kill Xiaolong and gripped his sword tightly, drawing the attention of everyone present. The host exclaimed in shock as Azumi collapsed, unconscious while still standing. He officially announced that Azumi had passed out and that the winner was Xiaolong, acknowledging the sheer tenacity of both fighters and calling for a big round of applause. With that, the quarterfinals concluded, and the host informed the audience that there would be a short intermission to reset the stage. The scene transitioned to a private room where Raffrey addressed Akito in a calm tone, explaining that under normal circumstances, interfering mid-battle would lead to an automatic disqualification. However, since Azumi had already violated the rules and the match technically hadn't begun, it was declared void, and he advised Akito to be more careful in the future. Akito bowed slightly and offered a quiet apology, internally admitting that his actions were reckless. As he glanced at Azumi, now lying unconscious with a cloth covering his eyes, he reflected on how his emotions had nearly led him to charge at Xiaolong and lose everything. Azumi, stirring weakly, expressed his gratitude, acknowledging that Akito had risked everything to save someone like him. Akito responded modestly, claiming that his body had moved on its own. Azumi then confessed with trembling voice that Xiaolong had tortured and murdered his wife, revealing that he had entered the tournament solely for revenge. Akito affirmed that he had overheard everything, though he doubted the rest of the crowd had. Azumi, now weeping, admitted that vengeance had consumed him, breaking his warrior's code and leading to a humiliating defeat, believing only his late wife would truly mourn his disgrace. Akito stood silent for a moment, then gently stated that she must have loved him deeply. Azumi, still resolute, claimed he couldn't turn back now, to which Akito replied that if he could return to a normal life, he should, and that he himself would take Azumi's place and ensure justice was delivered, believing that people like Xiaolong deserved no mercy. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Irish stirred awake at her desk, glancing at the time and cursing softly that she had dozed off. With 2 nights of no sleep finally catching up to her, she noticed the night sky outside and remarked that Akito hadn't returned yet, meaning he likely hadn't lost. A voice rang out in the street announcing that tomorrow's big clash would be Akito versus Xiaolong, and Irish, clutching her upgraded Magitech system, murmured to herself with uncertainty, recalling her master and hoping that she had made the right decision. The scene shifted again to a quiet chamber where Keck respectfully informed Lord Xiaolong that it was nearing the appointed hour and took his leave. Xiaolong, emerging from a steamy bath, remarked on how late it had gotten, prompting Keck to respond affirmatively. Xiaolong called out for Kak, asking if he thought the next guy had any chance, trying to remember his name. Kak answered that it was the one with the Magitech limbs, Kyuju. Xiaolong nodded, acknowledging that guy, while Kak coldly stated that Kyuju was just a gimmick user relying on tricks. He declared his intent to win the match and then forfeit the finals, encouraging Xiaolong to relax and enjoy himself. Xiaolong studied him thoughtfully while sipping a drink and remarked on his lack of ambition. He reminded Kak that being at the top came with perks and questioned what Kak truly wanted, suggesting that titles attracted fools like moths to a flame and that he could have women and money just by claiming them. As he turned to leave, he asked if Kak truly believed he could get what he wanted by living in Xiaolong's shadow. Kak, expression steady, replied that the only thing he wanted was for Lord Xiaolong to remain the strongest. Xiaolong smirked, finding that interesting. Next day arrived with roaring crowds as the host announced that the semifinals stage was ready. He explained that for this round, the ring boundaries would be removed, welcoming everyone to the deadly Zen Garden, a stage modeled after the Flame Kingdom's historic dueling grounds built for true life-or-death combat. With contestant Bakia having forfeited, the host confirmed that this would be the final match of the day. Bakia offered a quiet apology, admitting he stood no chance. The referee then addressed Kak, requesting him to proceed, and Kak acknowledged, deep in thought about strength. As he walked, he reflected on how he once chased that ideal, but while Xiaolong became a hero and then indulged in laziness and luxury, he still held the title of strongest, as if mocking all of Kak's efforts. Kak reaffirmed to himself that as long as Xiaolong remained the strongest, he would be content living in his shadow. The host's voice boomed through the arena, announcing that both contestants had entered the stage. Kyuju versus Kak. The referee declared that with ring-out rules removed, the battle would continue until one side was unable to fight or yielded. Kak centered himself and thought with quiet resolve that his only wish was to prove that Xiaolong was truly the strongest. Akito attacked, but Kak blocked the strike, prompting Akito to think this guy could really fight. He struck again, and once more Kak blocked it, then countered with a low sweep that forced Akito to leap, only for Kak to suddenly plant both hands on the ground and kick upward with such precision that his foot connected with Akito's jaw, launching him into the air with a rare technique that relied only on 2 fingers for ground support. As Akito descended, Kak jumped up to meet him, unleashing a flurry of attacks that Akito struggled to defend against while observing the astonishing speed of Kak's strikes and murmuring that he couldn't keep blocking for long. Kak taunted him, asking what was wrong and telling him to hit already, while the host, momentarily stunned, found his voice as a fan shouted in amazement, and the host exclaimed that this was absolutely incredible, calling it a masterclass even a layman could appreciate. declaring Kak's elegant, refined movements to be the classic Xiaolong style at its peak, while Kyuju held firm against it. Another wondered aloud if it was just their imagination, or if both fighters' styles looked strangely similar. Xiaolong yawned, resting his chin on his hand, watching as Kak eyed Akito and called out to him, accusing him of picking up a few Xiaolong moves but insulting the style with his fighting, vowing to crush his toy too. Akito replied that since Kak talked so much about Xiaolong's style, he had a question for him, asking if Kak was supposed to be Xiaolong's number 2, serving as his right-hand man with that level of skill. Then questioned whether Kak even knew what kind of scum Xiaolong was, saying any style learned under such a man was doomed, and Kak had chosen the wrong man to follow. Kak shouted for him to shut up, insisting that Xiaolong's style was the strongest in the world, leaving no room for doubt, and his fury ignited as his clothes tore, revealing his massive physique, causing Akito to realize that he had activated the diamond technique, one of Xiaolong's style's ultimate forms that used a special breathing and chi method to explosively enhance the body. Kak's punch sent Akito flying, making him think how blindingly fast the strike was. But Kak appeared behind him and delivered another blow that broke his arm, forcing Akito to curse as he flew through the air, realizing that Kak had pushed his body past its limits just like Xiaolong's hyper-chi technique, and that no toy could block such power. Only Xiaolong's style could produce something so overwhelming. Kak roared and punched again, claiming it was the ultimate Xiaolong style and the strongest power in the world, while the host shouted that Kak had gone feral, launching a brutal offensive with Kyuju unable to land a hit, wondering if the match had already been decided. Akito responded that if that was what Kak called the world's strongest, then his world must be tiny, and told him he really needed to get out more. Kak lunged again, threatening to snap Akito's other arm, but Akito's next move stunned him as he questioned the strange feeling, realizing he hadn't seen his own right arm and wondering where it had gone, before throwing his rope arm around a rock and punching Kak from a blind spot so hard that blood burst from his mouth as he screamed in pain. The host, watching this, exclaimed that Akito had looped his arm using a rope hidden behind the rock and nailed Kak in the jaw from behind, while Bakia, who had forfeited the semifinals, appeared and explained that Kyuju had been luring Kak toward the rock from the beginning, even hiding his right arm, praising him as a genius. The host thanked Bakia for the commentary as Kak tried to stand, only for Akito to approach and tell him not to bother, saying he had probably lost all sense of up or down. Kak accused him of being cowardly and taking a cheap shot, asking if he had no respect for the battlefield, but Akito admitted that if it had been a dojo match, he would have lost, acknowledging it was one hell of a punch that might have even topped Xiaolong for a moment, recognizing how hard Kak had trained. Kak replied that was why it was such a waste, and Akito told him he needed to see more of the world because as long as he followed Xiaolong, he would never be the strongest. Kak looked at his hand, stuck in thought as he remembered how everywhere he went, people recognized him and shouted that Master Kak had arrived and that they had always admired him, even calling the Grand Master a bit wild, and Kak realized he was the shadow. He stood, shouting that Xiaolong's style was the strongest and that he must be the one to lead it as its guiding example, then suddenly grabbed Akito, yelling that he would not lose to him. But Akito drove a powerful punch into his stomach, making him bleed again from the mouth as Akito smiled and remarked that he was not bad. The host shouted that the winner was Kyuju, and with that, tomorrow's final match was set. 2 warriors preparing to face off for the championship title, their names igniting the crowd into a frenzy as the host announced the next and final battle would be Kyuju versus Xiaolong. He marveled aloud at who could have predicted such an outcome, that Xiaolong's final opponent in his quest for a 6th title would be a mysterious newcomer with a mechanical arm, urging everyone not to miss the grand finals and to stay tuned. As Kak exited the arena in silence, Akito called out to him, reminding him that as long as he stood beside Xiaolong, he would never be the strongest. Kak paused only to hear a voice comment on his total defeat, looking up in shock to see Xiaolong himself standing there. Xiaolong casually greeted him, and Kak, bowing his head, apologized, admitting he had failed to meet expectations and brought shame to Xiaolong's name. But Xiaolong smirked, saying he had really gotten wrecked and that the fight was too much for him, then offered to fix Kak's injuries by showing him a healing pressure point he had recently discovered. Kak, confused and hesitant, started to respond, but Xiaolong suddenly pressed the point, and Kak screamed in agony, his body convulsing as Xiaolong mockingly asked what he was and told him there was no need to hold back. Kak's pain grew unbearable, nerves flaring, as Xiaolong removed his finger and wondered aloud if he had missed the spot, then grinned and said he was just kidding before ordering Kak to show the strength of Xiaolong's style. With cold contempt, he accused Kak of dragging their name through the mud and declared that he was no longer of any use. As the pain intensified to the point that Kak felt his nerves about to burst, He cried out for his master, but Xiaolong ignored him completely and coldly told him to die, calling him worthless trash. Kak collapsed, and Xiaolong, watching him die, turned his gaze forward and remarked that it looked like Kyuju would be a worthy opponent, feeling his blood begin to boil as he started laughing maniacally. The next day, people gathered at the stadium. The name of the famed hero Xiaolong and the mysterious warrior with the prosthetic arm on every tongue. News of the unprecedented final having spread across the continent, even reaching those who mattered most. Akito returned to the hotel, where Iris, upon seeing him, threw down her suitcase and shouted in frustration that he had barely made it in time. She scolded him for making her pull 3 straight all-nighters and demanded he be ready to pay her back, while Akito quietly apologized for the unreasonable request. She wasn't having it and shouted for him to strip immediately because they were out of time, opening the suitcase and yelling at the mess inside, asking what he would have done if she hadn't made it in time. Akito told her he had trusted her, and she stared at him, saying he was getting way too good at handling her. Her voice softened as she looked down and admitted that since this might be the last time, she had something to say. She confessed she didn't really care about revenge, and as he focused on her, she sat down and admitted she honestly wished he would stop. Taking out the arm, she said she had watched him all this time and understood why he felt the way he did, knowing she couldn't stop him. Recently, she had been having a dream about the two of them opening a quiet little workshop together in a town no one knew, not as masters, but simply as a skilled Magitech engineer and a monster hunter making a living. She thought they would do just fine. Akito responded that it sounded like something he could see, but she shouted over him while affixing the new arm to his shoulder, insisting she knew it was too late but made him promise one thing. She asked him to promise he would come back alive. Akito placed his hand gently on her head and reminded her that he had told her once before he would never leave her alone. As the Magitech arm locked into place, she declared he was ready and that it looked good. In the arena, Xiaolong and Akito stood across from each other once more, their eyes locked. Unlike yesterday, the crowd had fallen into an eerie silence, whether out of respect for Akito's strength or due to the ominous aura both men now radiated. Azumi stood among the spectators, watching with quiet tension, sensing that something historic was about to unfold. The audience murmured in confusion when Xiaolong suddenly began to laugh, congratulating Akito and assuring him it was a genuine compliment. Akito remained silent, prompting Xiaolong to taunt him further, saying he would never eat him, and shouted that this arena was the absolute peak of the tournament, rallying the crowd to give it up. Akito finally spoke, saying Xiaolong hadn't changed a bit since 4 years ago and was still the same piece of filth, which meant he could kill him with 0 regrets. Xiaolong smirked and asked if Akito thought the tournament rules would stop him from killing, to which Akito replied that he had taken the words right out of his mouth, then challenged him to bring it. The referee stood confused while Azumi watched, questioning if this was the pressure she had been up against, and Bakia realized it was beginning while Iris prayed silently to the gods. The referee declared the finals had begun, and in an instant the ground beneath them shattered as both fighters vanished from sight. The host, stunned, shouted that they had disappeared, asking where they had gone as dust and soil burst into the air. The crowd searched frantically until the host pointed out the storm of debris as Xiaolong relentlessly attacked, only to be blocked each time by Akito's rapid defense. Each of Xiaolong's punches missed and crashed into the arena walls, splintering stone and shaking the stadium. He began laughing as he darted to the other side, shouting that they should end this quickly and that this pathetic farce had gone on long enough. From the crowd, Iris shouted, calling out to Akito and apologizing for keeping him waiting, announcing that the new Magitech arm was complete. She beamed with excitement as she revealed that it now had jets, allowing him to pummel enemies from the sky. When Akito activated them, surprised and impressed, he said she actually made it, calling it awesome. She proudly added that the left arm could now fire high-density compressed magic blasts, urging him to pulverize Xiaolong and obliterate him completely. Watching him use it filled her with joy, and she laughed, exclaiming that the ideas just kept coming and that one day she would turn Akito himself into a gigantic Magitech weapon and burn all 5 great cities to the ground. Suddenly, she jolted awake, shouting in shock before calming herself, realizing aloud that it had only been a dream. That small stone mountain between them shattered when Xiaolong yanked a rope that snapped apart, launching Akito into the air. Activating his new Magitech unit, designed by Akito and engineered by Iris specifically to counter Xiaolong. He unleashed a high-speed, close-quarters system with twin rotary engines embedded in the legs spinning at hypervelocity, driven by his overwhelming magical power to generate explosive bursts of momentum. The result was mobility magnified severalfold beyond human limits. Akito sprinted behind a stone wall, but Xiaolong swiftly caught up, delivering a powerful kick that broke through the barrier. Akito sidestepped, stunned by the sheer force and confused by Xiaolong's speed, only to be caught off guard again as Xiaolong smirked and aimed another kick. Akito blocked it, but the momentum sent the strike crashing into a stone pillar behind him, obliterating it. Balancing on one hand, Akito prepared a spinning kick, recognizing the pressure and thinking it must be super chi. His counterattack came fast, but Xiaolong tilted his head, dodging the blow at the last second. Both men locked eyes before erupting into a blur, circling each other across the stadium with such speed that it left the host speechless, dropping her mic and barely managing to announce that she no longer had the words to describe what she was witnessing. Iris watched with awe, thinking it was incredible, the true battle between a former hero and a living legend. They continued exchanging blows and defenses, Akito realizing he had yet to land a single strike. Every attack from Xiaolong carried lethal force, even a glancing hit could sever a limb. But that was nothing new. Fighting him was like facing a whirlwind, or rather, a power drill. Yet Akito still had the speed advantage. Xiaolong specialized in close-range combat, and as long as Akito remained mobile, he held the upper hand. Suddenly, Xiaolong taunted him, guessing Akito had studied his technique closely, then raised his leg and declared that Akito had made one fatal mistake, believing a genius like him wouldn't have accounted for that. Akito's eyes widened in alarm as Xiaolong stomped the ground so hard it began to rupture beneath him, using martial star earth-shaking step. Akito realized too late that Xiaolong had destabilized his footing by targeting the wheels beneath him. Xiaolong, unleashing his full strength, roared that it was over and called upon Thunder Summon, Ardent Step. He surged forward at blinding speed, slamming into Akito and carrying him across the arena so violently that trails of steam and soil erupted from the ground. Iris screamed for him to watch out, remembering when Akito had warned her that Xiaolong was a close combat savant. Back during their days as heroes, he had always been the first into battle. No one, not even Akito, could defeat him in pure one-on-one combat. A natural-born fighter, he had earned the title Battle Master at just 17 and built a martial arts academy that spanned the continent. Reflecting on it now, she understood how Xiaolong had even stolen Akito's cheat skill. Akito had once explained that Xiaolong called it Hyper Qi Gong, though it was truly a gift of strength, an ability that channeled raw magic into the body for limitless enhancement. In short, fighting him head-on was suicide. Distance was the only viable strategy. But Iris hesitated, realizing that while the affixed arm was built for high mobility and its durability far exceeded any of her previous designs, that alone wouldn't be enough to win. She considered whether Akito could simply dodge until Xiaolong burned out, only to remember that his ability passively regenerated stamina nearly endlessly. She gasped, calling it broken, and Akito agreed, but reminded her that he was the only person on the planet who knew how to beat him. When she asked how, he remained silent for a moment before laughing and saying it was simple. Back in the arena, Akito analyzed Xiaolong's every move, recalling that this ability once belonged to him. With his Magitech hand, he delivered a devastating punch to Xiaolong's chest that made his opponent cough blood, stunned by the force. Xiaolong's eyes widened in disbelief, recognizing the ability and stammering in confusion. But Akito clarified that Hyper Qi Gong wasn't a passive technique that enhanced everything at once. It required absolute precision in internal magic manipulation. He broke it down, explaining that if one's total magic capacity was 100, it might be distributed as 60 for offense, 10 for defense, and 30 for speed, more or less. He observed that the more power invested into offense, the weaker the defense became. Xiaolong's fatal flaw, Akito pointed out, was his poor control under pressure. In the heat of combat, he instinctively redirected all defensive magic into raw attack when going for a strike. That last attack had left him with 0 defense. A well-timed counterattack from a blind spot, the exact moment of contact, was all it took to exploit that weakness. Akito added that his whole strategy depended on taking at least one hit, which was why Iris had reinforced the durability of his Magitech prosthetics. Studying Xiaolong's expression, Akito commented that he looked confused, probably wondering how he knew all this, and told him to think about it. There was only one person in the world who truly understood the inner workings of that ability. Xiaolong stared at him in disbelief, his voice trembling as he laughed and muttered that it couldn't be, calling out in stunned recognition, "Akito, big brother." Back in the day, Akito rested on a large stone, yawning as he glanced over at his friends deep in discussion and muttered that it was yet another closed-door meeting without him. They had brushed him off again, saying it was business only the big 5 nations were allowed to hear. Whatever he murmured, claiming not to care. Suddenly, from below, Xiaolong called out, shouting his name. Akito sat up and called back, asking what was up and why he wasn't in the meeting. Xiaolong responded that they had kicked him out, saying nothing ever got done with him around. Akito smirked, admitting that sounded about right just as Xiaolong began drinking. Akito shouted at him, asking if he was drinking again and reminding him he was a lightweight. Xiaolong insisted he had the wrong idea and claimed it was tactical training, combat conditioning while drunk, something he called drunk fist. Akito murmured that it was almost clever, then called out to him. Xiaolong turned to look as Akito asked to be taught martial arts too, specifically that move from earlier. Xiaolong appeared confused until Akito clarified, saying it was the one where he closed in at lightning speed and that it looked badass. Xiaolong recognized the technique and named it Arrow Step, agreeing casually to teach him. As Akito tried the technique and stumbled, Xiaolong laughed and corrected him, saying he was putting way too much force into his legs and that it was more like boom, bam, slam. Akito grumbled that Xiaolong sucked at teaching. Xiaolong then explained properly. After a strong forward step, you leap straight in front of the enemy and deliver strikes using the momentum of that leap. It was all about power and speed, but once midair, there was no way to pivot. Akito asked if that meant it could be easily dodged or countered if the opponent saw it coming. Xiaolong confirmed it. Akito then questioned whether he should be explaining all this so casually. Xiaolong replied that it was fine since he was the only genius who could pull it off anyway, and that most martial artists didn't go blabbering about their techniques. He then extended a hand toward Akito. Flashing forward to the present battle, Akito stood tall while Xiaolong dropped to his knees and looked up at him, asking if they weren't close once. Onlookers around them began whispering in shock, marveling that in all their years watching, they had never seen Xiaolong like this. This could be something huge. As Xiaolong slid back, Akito stared at him with sharpened focus. Xiaolong smirked, warning not to expect survival, and commented on Akito's appearance, asking if it was because of the self-destruction and saying he looked like death warmed over. Akito replied that, cliché as it sounded, he had crawled out of the grave for revenge, especially after what they had done to him. He warned Xiaolong to return what he had stolen, the ring. Xiaolong stood, laughing and shouting that Akito's very existence was a massive inconvenience. Akito remained calm while Xiaolong fell into silent thought, wondering why the crowd wasn't reacting, then realized that during their quest, they had gone straight for the Demon King's castle, so no one had really seen their faces. That actually played in his favor. If he killed Akito here, no one would ever know the hero killer was real. What an idiot, he thought, walking right into the trap. Akito, standing farther away, noted that Xiaolong had increased his regeneration and that his usual counters wouldn't work, meaning it was time to shift into Phase 2. He hurled his rope arm, and Xiaolong slid into a defensive stance, recognizing it from the prelims and thinking it wouldn't work again. But Akito gripped the back wall and reeled himself in with the steel wire, closing the gap in an instant, stunning Xiaolong. Akito launched a rapid assault from multiple angles, forcing Xiaolong to defend while struggling to keep up. Suddenly, one strike connected, and he fell. Iris, watching intently, cheered, realizing that Hyper Qi Gong's defense only activated when Xiaolong reallocated his magic. Unorthodox feints like Akito's were his specialty. Xiaolong was losing his rhythm. As Xiaolong ran, Akito chased him, thinking that he would now shift everything into defense and reinforce his body the entire time. Using Hyper Qi Gong, Xiaolong attempted a powerful kick, shattering a stone, but was shocked when Akito caught his foot and countered with a punch, shouting as the blow landed. Xiaolong's eyes widened when he saw he had punched Akito's arm, but Akito only asked if that was all, saying the strike barely scratched him. With a smile, Akito thought that even his heavy defense couldn't be penetrated by Xiaolong's current level. He taunted, suggesting Xiaolong wasn't mastering the ability and offered pointers for old times' sake. Xiaolong recoiled in disbelief, and Akito added that he still flew off the handle when angry, just like always. He then punched him across the face, spinning him upside down. Xiaolong, enraged, snarled that Akito was a worthless leftover, preaching as if he were better. He'd had enough. No more holding back. Rising with deadly focus, he suddenly vanished and reappeared with a brutal strike that sent blood spraying from Akito's mouth. Akito screamed in disbelief, unable to even see the attack. Xiaolong, his voice cold and final, declared that he was done. Leiazi didn't deal with annoying insects. Activating Thunder Lord Body Shift, he warned that Leiazi wouldn't even grant a blink before his opponent lay dead. Xiaolong returned just as Akito launched his rope punch again, but it failed to connect, and Xiaolong had already delivered a brutal punch that sent him flying to the ground. Akito groaned, trying to steady himself, and muttered in disbelief, wondering what the hell was happening, realizing Xiaolong's reaction speed and power had reached a completely different level. Without warning, Xiaolong leapt onto his back, hammering him with another punch and then kicking him straight in the jaw, launching him upward as Akito screamed in pain, blinded, shouting that he couldn't see him. Iris called out to him in panic while Xiaolong laughed maniacally, declaring that this was the mark of a genius and internally scoffing at the idea of precise magic distribution. Deciding he only needed 2 modes, 100% speed while moving and 100% power while striking, everything else being irrelevant, boasting that no one alive could match his acceleration now. Then unleashed the ultimate move he claimed to have crafted as a genius, activating the power of the Thunder Lord Body Shift, and sprinted after Akito. Even subconsciously, Xiaolong had stopped relying on sight altogether, sensing Akito's subtle magical fluctuations through the air and his own skin, reacting purely on instinct, and to think he could execute something like that in the middle of a heated battle confirmed just how much of a genius he truly was. Akito crashed into the side of a stone mountain, cursing in pain, his rope cut and his expression stunned as Xiaolong appeared above him and mocked that he was too slow. A sudden blast rocked the area, knocking Akito to the ground again as Iris screamed his name, panic rising as she thought to herself that at this rate things were spiraling fast. Azumi appeared behind her and muttered that it wasn't looking good, while Bacchia joined from the side and muttered the same, prompting Iris to glare at both and demand who these old dudes were. The host shouted, questioning why everyone was crowding over here, noting that only these two seemed to understand what was going on, with someone else agreeing that even the commentators had bylaid. Bacchia and Azumi introduced themselves casually, prompting Iris to say nice before immediately snapping that it was not nice, and that this wasn't a tea party. Bacchia, unfazed, asked if she knew that guy, pointing out that at this rate he was going to get killed out there. Iris insisted he would be fine, but her heart wavered as she thought to herself that everything had been in place. Even with Affix's mobility crippled, it still had enough functionality to keep fainting drop-ins, and Akito's name should have shaken Xiaolong. But the real surprise was Xiaolong's terrifying bloodlust the moment he recognized Akito. Watching the fight unfold, she saw Xiaolong kick Akito in the face just as he was about to punch. The impact so fierce it forced him back again, and Xiaolong thought with disdain that seeing him made him recall all the hatred he had harbored. He kicked Akito in the stomach, sending him crashing away, thinking how everyone only ever talked about the so-called hero, the glory, the admiration, how Akito had taken it all, and no matter what Xiaolong accomplished, no one ever looked his way. Akito had basked in every moment under the spotlight, and Xiaolong clenched his teeth in rage, declaring himself to be the real genius. He remembered how free he felt when Akito vanished, how he had always imagined he would be the one to finish him, how he had stolen his cheat ability and ascended to become the absolute strongest, claiming the Flame Nation could no longer function without him, that the Empire existed to serve him, and soon the hero fanatics would fade into memory. And yet, here Akito stood again, facing him once more. Xiaolong shouted in fury, demanding to know if he was a damn zombie, while Akito remained silent. Xiaolong scoffed and stated that it didn't matter because this time he would tear him to shreds, then stomped the ground using his earth-shaking step, cracking the earth beneath with immense force. Akito jumped, recognizing the same trick again, but as he looked ahead, Xiaolong was gone and a rock struck him unexpectedly, prompting a confused reaction. Azumi observed that he took the bait, while Bacchia shouted in frustration. Akito's rope hand was now caught on the stone, and he realized the wires had already been set, and he couldn't dodge from that position, frantically wondering where Xiaolong had gone. Looking up, he saw Xiaolong descending toward him, announcing his final technique, pole strike. A move so powerful it was said to have split sacred mountains where gods once walked, the ultimate trump card of the hero Wan Xiaolong. Channeling every drop of magic into his foot, Xiaolong declared that even a graze from it would pulverize Akito into a crimson smear, boasting that he didn't even need to aim, that Akito's leg boosters were gone and his fancy arms were pinned, asking mockingly what he would do now if he had anything left. Xiaolong then screamed that it was over and called for Akito's death as he unleashed the blazing annihilation bomb, charging it with overwhelming power. Just as it was about to hit, Akito laughed to himself, thinking here it comes, then launched his leg up and kicked Xiaolong square in the mouth, drawing blood and shocking everyone. The host shouted in disbelief at the use of his leg, and Akito grinned, asking who had said he could only launch his arms. As Xiaolong vomited blood, Akito reminded him that one should always save their ace for last, his leg adjusting smoothly back to his body as he continued, stating that in the end it was meaningless. No matter how fast Xiaolong moved, his fatal flaw never changed, and all Akito had to do was wait for the moment his guard completely dropped. Xiaolong, hearing this, roared with rage, but Akito smiled with grim satisfaction, thinking it had been one hell of a road, and remarked that someone as dense as Xiaolong would never grasp that. Then at last, with no hesitation, he began pummeling Xiaolong without mercy, thinking this was the moment of reckoning. Before reincarnating, Akito had been a hardcore fighting game player, and he figured that if he injected specialized magic into the pseudonerves of his Magitech limb, he might be able to chain continuous attacks. After much trial and error, he made it happen, and the more magic he pumped in, the faster his combo accelerated without limit. This was Akito's finishing move, the Gatling route. He continued punching, grinding Xiaolong's face into the ground, laughing as memories surfaced, recalling how long he had dreamed of this moment, how for 4 years he had waited for it. Akito screamed for him to die, swearing he would never forgive him, punching relentlessly, but when Xiaolong tried to respond, Akito stepped aside and struck him with his elbow, sneering and questioning if he still had the strength to talk, guessing it still wasn't enough to kill him. Xiaolong pleaded, telling him to stop, but Akito, confused by the sudden shift, punched him again with rage, yelling that he said die, accusing him of betrayal and power theft, declaring he didn't care what anyone else had to say. He kept landing blow after blow, snarling for him to die over and over while Xiaolong, unable to move, cried out that he would really die. Clenching his teeth, Xiaolong tried to lift himself and offered the ring, begging for his life, telling Akito to take it and not kill him. Akito froze, stunned as he looked at Xiaolong's battered face, and the crowd erupted in shock, murmuring that Xiaolong had admitted defeat. Akito took the ring just as the referee blew the whistle, confusion spreading like wildfire through the arena. The referee raised his voice and declared Kyuju immediately disqualified for major rule violations, citing unauthorized weapons beyond declared Magitech specifications and repeated attacks with clear intent to kill, officially declaring Xiaolong the winner. Azumi and Bakia stood in disbelief, and Azumi erupted, demanding where the referee had been looking, accusing him of blindness or stupidity, yelling that Xiaolong had been doing the same thing, demanding the fight be restarted. Someone grabbed the mic, and as the crowd fell silent, they recognized it was the king of the Flame Nation. Stunned whispers rippled across the stands as he addressed the crowd, stating that the ruling had been made after a thorough investigation by their committee, and that it was obvious Kyuju had used Magitech far beyond what he had registered, calling it a disgrace to a sacred tournament and affirming their commitment to taking such matters seriously. However, he admitted that their inspection process had shortcomings, and so Kyuju would face a hearing, and a rematch would be scheduled later. The king turned his gaze to Xiaolong, who remained silent, and murmurs spread through the crowd about a rematch being decreed by royal order. The king asked if all was clear and told everyone to disperse, ordering guards to detain Akito. As the guards moved, Akito continued to stare coldly at Xiaolong. The host, flustered, tried to make sense of it all, shouting that the arena was in complete chaos, admitting even he had no idea what had just happened, pleading with the crowd to stop throwing things. Either way, with that announcement, the Flame Nation's grand tournament had come to an end. That night back at the hotel, Iris collapsed onto the bed, groaning in exhaustion and declaring that she was finally able to lie down after pulling 3 consecutive all-nighters, scolding Akito for making a lady live like that. He told her she had earned her rest. Iris glanced at the ring in Akito's hand and told him he had done a good job, affirming that it was only the first step but a significant one nonetheless. Just reaching this far was real progress. He nodded quietly and agreed, whispering that he had actually done it. She told him he should be proud, but more importantly, she was just glad he made it back alive. She lay down peacefully, and Akito, watching her fall asleep, gently placed a blanket over her and smiled. The scene shifted to a distant mansion where the king walked into the jungle with a single guard. The guard grumbled that everything was a mess, but the king smirked and said it served them right. More seriously, he ordered that the entire incident must not leak and that Kyuju must not escape, noting that he was still useful. Meanwhile, Xiaolong sat alone in his room, clutching his chest, screaming in pain, tearing off his bandages and roaring with rage at the humiliation Akito had inflicted. He smashed a jar in fury and cursed, thinking that if only he still had Ultra Qigong, he could have healed his wounds in seconds. He vowed to get it back, swearing that his only mistake had been fighting Akito in the soft, rule-bound world of a tournament, admitting he had grown complacent before the match even began, and that was how he lost. But if he tossed aside the rules and did things his own way, he believed there was no chance he would ever lose. He remembered the engineer girl who had been hanging around Akito and resolved to kidnap her to lure him out, fantasizing about gutting him, tearing out every last organ slowly. Just then, as he smirked at his cruel thoughts, a breeze blew through the room and he growled in annoyance, shouting at the maids for leaving the window open. When no one responded, he yelled again, demanding to know where everyone was. He staggered to his feet, cursing the sting of the night air on his wounds, ranting that every last one of them was useless without him. As he reached to close the window, calling it a kingdom full of incompetence, he heard a sharp clink and looked down, confused, then stared in horror at his own arm. A deep gash had appeared. As panic took over, he screamed in pain while Akito sat quietly nearby with a knife, his expression cold and deliberate, whispering that now the real fun begins. Xiaolong writhed on the floor, screaming in agony as he clutched his severed arm, howling about the pain while Akito stood over him, cold and unwavering, asking if he had seriously thought that was all there was, declaring he was there to make him pay. Akito grabbed his hair and yanked his head up, stating flatly that they were both running out of time, so they would keep this short, reminding him that he was bleeding out and wouldn't last long. Xiaolong, trembling and gasping, asked what Akito was, to which Akito responded with a cold glare and said if he answered honestly, maybe he would be sent to a slightly less miserable hell. Holding up the ring, he demanded to know how to unlock his power from it, asking what he had to do after putting it on. Xiaolong laughed bitterly through the pain and shouted that Akito had to be kidding, asking if he really thought he would betray them and get away with it, saying he'd be dead either way. Without hesitation, Akito drove the knife into his other hand, and Xiaolong screamed louder, while Akito coldly demanded if he had a brain, telling him to talk or die right there. In anguish, Xiaolong cried out that he would talk and began rambling that old man Doug had explained everything from the start, begging Akito to pull the knife out. Akito growled at him to spit it out immediately, and Xiaolong, through gasps, explained that after putting the ring on, one had to pour magic into it. The stronger the better. Akito wore the ring and muttered that it wasn't activating, even though he was channeling magic through his Magitech limb, realizing that if this truly was the real ring, there had to be a reason he couldn't unlock it. Shrugging it off, he said, "Fine, next question," and as Xiaolong blinked in confusion, Akito demanded information on the other four, the ones holding his stolen powers, ordering him to reveal their weaknesses, locations, everything. Xiaolong hesitated, whispering that he couldn't, knowing he would be as good as dead if he did, and reminded Akito that he had said he'd go easy on him if he talked, only to remember what Akito truly said about a slightly less miserable hell. Realizing he had been tricked, he tried to escape, but Akito dragged him back and sliced his body open, blood spilling across the floor as Akito looked at his bloodied knife and muttered that in the end, he didn't get much out of him. He stared at Xiaolong's broken body and admitted he hadn't expected much anyway, calling him a disposable grunt who likely didn't know anything useful about them, concluding it was time to end this and move on. As he turned away, Xiaolong, with a broken voice, begged not to be killed and called him Big Bro, which made Akito freeze, reminded of the time Xiaolong used to call him that when they were close. He hesitated, thinking Xiaolong had lost an arm, the so-called hero had hit rock bottom, and he couldn't fight anymore. Akito began to walk away, but Xiaolong suddenly sprang up and slashed at him with a sword. Akito blocked it, countered swiftly, and cut Xiaolong's leg, sending him crashing back to the floor in shock. Akito observed him and thought coldly that he never let his guard down that easily. As he glanced at Xiaolong, he reflected that this marked the end for the Flame Nation, while Xiaolong, bleeding on the ground, cursed him and swore he would kill him. Akito silently concluded that without its hero, this country would not last, telling him to stave off the downfall as long as possible until his revenge was complete, then turned away and left, shutting the door behind him. Back at the hotel, Akito shook Iris awake and whispered for her to get up. She groggily asked what time it was, but he hushed her, warning that guards were watching the place and told her to pack immediately because they were leaving. As she quickly gathered her things, she asked why they were being hunted, and Akito reminded her that they had humiliated their precious king, and that such an insult wouldn't be taken lightly. They rushed to the docks where Akito stated they were done here and they were leaving. Iris sighed, disappointed she hadn't even tried all the street food, and as they sat on the boat, the owner announced it was ready, and they quietly departed, hiding their identities. Once out of the port, Iris stretched her aching limbs, muttering that everything hurt, and while Akito paid the boatman, she reflected on how short their time in the Flame Nation felt, even though they had met and lost so many people. Akito snapped at her to quit getting sentimental, reminding her she hadn't even met half of them, and told her to focus because they needed to cross the border before it was sealed. As they left, Iris murmured that there was no peace for them, and Akito replied dryly, asking if she was only realizing that now. The boat owner, watching them go, slowly removed the bandages from his face and thought to himself that he had paid Akito back for breaking those chains, believing he deserved to see the world and what it had to offer. As he gazed out toward the horizon, he apologized silently and whispered that he had to go. The rematch never happened, and neither Akito nor Xiaolong ever returned to the arena. Days later, Xiaolong was declared gravely ill, a cover story fabricated by the Five Nations. Never appeared in public again, and with that the Flame Nation began its slow decline. The Flame Nation arc ended. In a dimly lit room, 4 individuals sat in silence, their faces obscured, until a girl finally spoke, declaring that it was time to begin the Heroes' Council. One man grumbled that he had been dragged away from his research for this, prompting the girl, Flora, to thank them for coming on such short notice, and to express her relief at seeing them all safe and well. They listened quietly, until one man revealed his face and sternly warned that this had better not be a waste of his time. In the depths of demon territory, within the ruined watchtower of Wetren region, surrounded by soldiers from the holy nation Marishia, the Musashi Empire, the Gala Empire, and Tristan, several key figures gathered in tense silence. As the heavy air hung around them, a girl descended the creaking staircase, her expression shifting to surprise upon noticing someone entering. She was Flora, saintess of the holy nation, known as the Land of the Gods. Smiling with a soft laugh, She remarked that it had been 4 years since they had all come together like this, voicing her excitement and commenting that everyone must have changed so much. The person who entered replied in a dry tone that such a sugary voice could only belong to Lady Flora, adding that she had not changed one bit in 4 years, and that it was frankly unsettling. He was Nagi Shinonome from the far eastern nation of Musashi. Flora teased back, calling her lovely as ever, prompting Nagi to scoff and retort that flattery would not work on her. Suddenly, another voice cut through the room, demanding an end to their chatter, prompting Flora to turn and acknowledge Lord Garun with surprise, stating that she had not realized he was already present. He was Garun Rudolph, a military figure from the powerful Gaia Empire. Flora mentioned they were just waiting for Lord Doug now and guessed he was probably off drinking again, cunning and late as usual. She opened the meeting room door and suggested they take their seats while waiting, but to their shock, someone was already sitting there, who greeted them coldly and told them to stop wasting time and speak. The three stared at him in silence until Shinonome suddenly drew his sword and shouted, demanding to know who he was, poised to attack. Flora quickly intervened, pleading with him to wait, guessing aloud that he must be Lord Doug, and wondered if this appearance was the result of that experiment. Shinonome stood frozen in disbelief, questioning her words, while Doug gave a low hum and dismissed the judgment of appearances as shallow, raising his hand to reveal a ring as proof of identity, even offering to demonstrate his power. Shinonome thought to himself that it was not just Doug's appearance that had changed, but his entire personality. Doug confirmed this transformation, claiming it was thanks to his cheat ability and years of research, that he had perfected the ultimate magic reversing the very logic of aging, then asked mockingly if they were jealous, and whether they wanted to learn it too. Garun cut in, shouting for him to stop with the show and tell. Flora nodded, saying he was right and they should move on. Once seated, she stood in front of them and said it was about Lord Xiaolong, asking if the rumors had reached them as well, and mentioning that supposedly some no-name hunter was behind the incident. Shinonome suggested that perhaps Lord Xiaolong had still been immature, both mentally and physically. Garun questioned whether someone with a cheat ability could fall so easily and demanded to know who it was. Flora placed an object wrapped in cloth onto the table and told them to take a look, uncovering it and asking if the artifact looked familiar. Shinonome screamed in shock, recognizing it as Akito's gear, and demanded to know where she found it. She explained that it had been circulating on the black market in the Flame Nation, that she had intercepted it, and had a rather unpleasant discussion with the merchant responsible, who confessed everything to her. With a mischievous tone, she said the poor man had revealed it was sold to an antique dealer near the Flame Tristan border 4 years ago, the seller's identity unknown, but the item had fetched a fortune. Doug concluded that the seller had clearly known exactly what they were selling. Shinonome pointed out that now, 4 years later, Lord Xiaolong had fallen in the Flame Nation, implying a connection. Doug turned to Flora and asked if she meant that Akito was still alive. Flora said it was likely, though the mystery was why he had remained hidden for so long. Garun stated that the one who defeated Xiaolong had used Magitech prosthetics, and that his men had returned with a report from the tournament in the Flame Nation, where someone nearly beat Xiaolong using advanced Magitech, noting that mastering such limbs took years. He speculated that if Akito had been training in secret all this time, it would make sense. Silence fell until Doug scoffed and dismissed the idea as ridiculous, calling Akito a powerless, broken failure, and proposing that they simply mobilize their forces and hunt him down like a rat. Shinonome called the plan foolish and warned that doing so would provoke the hero cult. Doug asked what that was, and Shinonome expressed disbelief that he did not know. Doug calmly stated he focused only on research. Flora explained that the hero cult was a rapidly growing movement spreading across nations, worshipping Akito as their savior. Shinonome added that if they, his former party, openly turned on him, it would spark a massive backlash. Flora pointed out that even if he was alive, the cult did not know yet, but if their betrayal was revealed, chaos would erupt, meaning they could not hunt Akito openly. Doug hummed thoughtfully. Garun declared that if Akito was alive, he would eventually come to reclaim his ring and seek revenge, and that they should prepare to crush him when he arrived. Flora cautioned that if any one of them claimed his ring first, it could collapse the balance among the 5 nations. Shinonome warned that such treachery would not be tolerated, and that betrayal would only benefit Akito, insisting that no one act alone. Someone voiced agreement, and they all stood and began walking toward the door, affirming that there were no objections and that everything was understood. Shinonome asked Flora her thoughts on the Flame Nation, noting that with Xiaolong gone, the power balance was shifting, and that the nation bordered his own. Flora paused, then described the Flame Nation as a juicy steak just sitting there, so tempting, before bursting into eerie laughter. Everyone turned to stare at her, and she suddenly adopted a sweet tone, claiming she was just kidding and that they would divide it equitably, of course. Doug told her to stop with the jokes and reminded everyone that they had agreed to no backstabbing. Shinonome warned Flora to be cautious if she traveled alone through the Flame Nation. Flora remained silent, then murmured to herself that everything was proceeding according to plan, noting that the Holy Nation had churches in every territory and that they would gather intel first, and if necessary, the faithful would act. Giggling to herself, she whispered that she could not wait, that she had grown so much stronger, and called for Akito to come to her soon. Meanwhile, hidden in the bushes nearby, Akito and Iris watched silently. Akito observed the Marishia border ahead and said they had somehow made it. Iris scoffed and replied that they had nearly died 10 times and sarcastically asked whose genius idea it was to cross through demon territory. Akito said he had no choice, as after the Flame Nation incident, he was probably on wanted posters. Pointing at the map, he explained that the route passed from Marishia through Tristan and AI Kingdom, with the only shortcut past the checkpoint being through demon territory. Iris shouted, demanding to know whose fault that was exactly. Akito continued moving and wondered aloud how they would sneak into Marishia, murmuring that Doug was there, the one who had sealed his power into that cursed ring, and that he needed to find him and get answers. His thoughts were interrupted when someone cried out in distress and a horse cart sped by. A girl inside screamed desperately for help. Iris turned, eyes wide, and shouted to Akito. He replied with confusion, but seeing the monster bursting from the earth, a huge worm-like creature, Iris screamed as the girl on the cart continued crying. Iris shouted to Akito that they should help them, and Akito, glancing at the danger, muttered that it looked like they had no choice as they both took off running after the cart. The girl screamed again as the massive worm lunged in front of her, her voice breaking in panic as she cried that they were going to die. Iris called out to Akito while running, cursing under her breath, and declaring that this one was going to cost them. Akito surged forward with the power of affix, his eyes sharp with resolve. The girl shut her eyes and shouted to the heavens for a brave hero, only to gasp and open them when she saw Akito battling the worm. Her breath caught as she glimpsed his face, stunned by how much he resembled the hero. 2 men near her knelt, introducing themselves with relief as Howard and Marcus, thanking Akito profusely and exclaiming that they thought they were dead, expressing total respect and a deep sense of gratitude. Iris scolded them sharply, stating they should have taken the desert far more seriously. Akito glared at them, scolding that they did not even lift a finger and questioning their decision to travel with only 3 people through demon territory, calling it suicide. Marcus admitted they had told their master it was insane, while Howard explained that their master had insisted on visiting the holy sites and would not take no for an answer. Akito narrowed his eyes and repeated the words holy sites out here with suspicion. Marcus elaborated that their master was kind of a big deal and probably had some grand gesture of thanks planned. Iris muttered to Akito that they were lunatics wandering half-naked through demon territory and declared that they were not getting involved, that she had had enough trouble for one day. Someone suddenly called out for their master, drawing Akito's attention. The girl ran toward them, repeating the word hero while gazing at Akito with trembling admiration. Howard turned and said their master was all right. The girl tried to compose herself, apologizing and explaining that she had lost her composure because he looked so much like Akito. She then placed a hand over her heart and said that this must be a blessing from the hero himself. Quietly to herself, she spoke in reverence and gratitude in the name of Hero Akito. She then introduced herself as Sarah Gillett, priestess of the hero's faith. Both Iris and Akito stared at her in shock. Sarah smiled softly, thanking the heavens for surviving another day and attributing it to Hero Akito's constant watch. She turned to her guards, calling Marcus and Howard to pray with her. Iris leaned close to Akito and asked who this person was. He muttered not to speak, thinking to himself that the world believed he was dead and that with a fan like her around, getting recognized would be a disaster. Iris pointed out that they had not even thanked them properly. Akito remained silent, then suddenly grabbed her arm, pulling her away and muttering that they needed to go. Iris blinked in confusion as Sarah ran after them, shouting that they must show proper gratitude. Akito turned and insisted there was no need, that they were in a hurry. Sarah pleaded that they at least join her in prayer. Akito, confused and panicked, asked why, while she insisted that surely he had been sent by Akito himself and that they must give thanks. He waved her off, insisting that they had merely been passing by. Sarah stared at him and said that everything happened for a reason, that she had survived this long because she prayed every day and that their encounter was no coincidence. She called out again, urging them to come and pray with her. Akito, overwhelmed, gave in, shouting for her to just let go and wondering how she could be so strong. Later, the group sat around, with Akito and Howard drinking while Marcus busied himself nearby and Iris and Sarah prayed behind them. Akito, eyebrows furrowed, commented that traveling across the Fire Nations on a holy pilgrimage was basically a death wish. Howard asked him not to say that, and added that their master had risen to her position at a very young age. Marcus noted that it was all because of her unwavering faith. Akito thought to himself with relief that they had managed to dodge the prayer. Howard leaned in with a more honest tone, admitting that they were not really that devoted themselves. Iris glanced towards Sarah, who remained deep in prayer. Howard placed a hand on Akito's shoulder, saying that maybe there was some divine protection involved, and that for someone like Akito to show up right when they needed saving, it had to mean something. Akito stayed silent, thinking that they did not recognize him as Akito or even as a hero, which meant his identity had not yet reached Marishia, and praised himself for avoiding Tristan and taking the shortcut through demon territory. He considered that the only hurdle now was the border checkpoint, and that perhaps he could convince these people to help with the paperwork. Iris shouted from a distance, calling him hero, and saying that Sarah could help them get into Marishia. Akito nearly choked and spat out his drink, shouting in disbelief and demanding to know why she would tell them that, reminding her that they were technically wanted fugitives. Iris rolled her eyes and told him to chill out, saying she had not told them anything important and that they had not even asked. She reasoned that they were all in a bind and helping each other was only natural, telling him not to overthink it. Akito remained silent until Sarah's voice came from behind, agreeing with Iris. He froze as she stepped closer and handed him something, acknowledging that he clearly had his reasons, but noted that he had not hesitated to save them back there. She said she would return the favor, because that was what Hero Akito would have done. As she turned to board the cart again, she informed them that they were heading to the Flame Nation for a ceremony, but that she still wanted to express her gratitude properly, handing over a letter and requesting that it be delivered to the hero's faith branch in Marishia. Iris waved goodbye from the cart, and Howard asked if it was really all right to let them come along. Marcus commented that they seemed shady and asked if they should be more cautious. Sarah remained silent, closing her eyes and remembering a moment from the past. She saw Akito helping a stranger while Xiaolong shouted that he could not rescue every orphan they came across, reminding him they were supposed to be hunting the demon lord. Shinonome added that saving one stray would only lead to 10 more showing up. He acknowledged understanding how Akito felt, but began to object when Akito shouted back, saying he knew it was selfish, but that he could not ignore someone begging for help. He admitted he was no saint, but declared that he was a hero. Remembering that moment, Sarah gazed at the locket around her neck and quietly accepted it, deciding to believe in Hero Akito. They soon entered Marishia, the capital city of the Magic Nation, a place where magic existed but few could wield it, and where mastery required knowledge and discipline. This nation invested more in magical education than any other. Arriving at the Hero's Faith Marishia branch, they stopped as a girl handed them a pouch containing 1,000 gold coins, which Sarah had mentioned. Iris lit up in excitement, her voice trembling as she declared it was finally real income. Akito muttered that their first stop would be a proper inn with a bath. Iris walked through the crowded marketplace, overwhelmed by the number of stalls. Akito observed silently, thinking that, as expected of the Magic Nation, magical tools and relics flooded the area. He called out to Iris to remind her they were here for revenge, not sightseeing, but when he turned, she had vanished. He spotted her at a nearby stall, sitting comfortably as she asked the shopkeeper if all the items were really magical tools. The man looked confused, then nodded. She picked up an object and asked about it. He explained it was a lamp that lit up when activated. She grabbed another item and asked again. He told her it was a cooling sheet that kept things cold. Akito watched and muttered that the items were mostly useless. He reasoned that, being a street stall, it was probably filled with tourist junk or low-tier tools for non-magic users like Iris. She picked up another item and asked about it. The man scratched his head and said he needed to check. Akito frowned and asked if he had not made it himself. The man replied that he only sold them while craftsmen made the goods and that their names should be on the tags. Iris checked and confirmed it. The man explained again that he just sold the products and took a cut. Akito nodded silently, thinking it made sense, and if there were tools, then there must be craftsmen behind them. He murmured that maybe one of them knew something about the ring. Iris called out again, holding another object and asking about it. The man chuckled and said it was a hair dryer that blew hot air, then activated it, letting the warm wind hit Iris's face. Akito raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. She picked up another item and asked again. The man said it was juice that turned fruit into water. Akito immediately tensed and shouted for him to hold up, demanding to know who made that magic tool. The man, slightly startled, responded that it had been made by the famous eccentric magic craftsman in the area, named Isis al-Rashid. Akito's heart skipped a beat as he thought with certainty that it had to be a reincarnator, an old ally from his past. They entered their hotel room, and upon seeing the bed, Iris shouted with joy, "This place is crazy," before flopping onto it and marveling at how soft it felt. She rushed to the bathroom and cried out in disbelief that the room had a private bath. Akito calmly noted that it looked like the priestess had arranged for them to stay at this luxurious inn, but reminded her they were not here to lounge around, as they still needed to find Doug. Iris shouted back from the bath, overwhelmed, asking what kind of heaven this was, tossing her clothes out and declaring that they could talk after she finished bathing. Emerging soon after, she saw Akito sitting on the bed examining the objects they had bought and asked with a smirk if he really had bought everything, wondering if he still suspected a connection to Doug. Akito replied that probably not, but it still bothered him. He murmured that at first, he had suspected another reincarnator might have created these items since they resembled things from their previous world, making the coincidence too strong to ignore. But now something felt off. He picked up a few items and pointed out that the blender, the hair dryer, and even the toaster were all strangely inaccurate. Then he held up what looked like a game console, which in reality was a tiny fan with sharpened blades, and explained that the shopkeeper had described it as a shaving machine. But in this hot country, a fan would be more practical. All the items had power cords, yet this world didn't even utilize electricity. Everything was familiar but fundamentally wrong. If this Isis was truly a reincarnator, they wouldn't have made tools like this. Just who the hell were they? Iris, now dressed, watched him with concern as Akito sat in silent confusion until a waiter entered and announced their food was ready. Iris leapt up excitedly, exclaiming that she had been starving, then took her plate and teasingly handed one to the hero, who muttered his thanks. Akito unrolled a map of the Marishia region and studied it carefully before seeking out the hero's faith priest to ask about Doug's whereabouts. The priest confirmed that Akito was still trying to track Doug down and told him that Doug should still be at his manor. Both Akito and Iris listened intently, surprised by the simplicity of the answer. The priest continued, explaining that after returning as a hero from the demon lord's subjugation 4 years ago, Doug had been granted a title and made a lord. Since then, he had mostly stayed holed up in his manor, supposedly focused on magical research. Akito pressed further, asking about any suspicious activity or movements, but the priest shrugged and admitted that he had barely even remembered Doug existed until Akito brought him up. However, he added that Doug had a great reputation. His taxes were half the national rate, and he openly welcomed the poor to settle in his lands. When Akito asked if there was anything else, the priest recalled an odd rumor Doug's manor was up in the mountains and clearly visible from the village, but anyone who took the path there always returned. Some folks thought it was something supernatural. Iris shrieked in alarm, claiming it had to be ghosts, prompting Akito to ask when she started believing in such things. Later that night, Akito and Iris rode toward the village, the moon casting shadows over the quiet path. Akito, staring ahead, muttered that it was Doug's manor and turned to Iris, telling her she didn't have to come and could have stayed at the inn. She shouted back that the second she left him alone, he would do something reckless again and accused him of being such a handful. Akito grumbled under his breath, wondering if she was his mother now. As they entered the village, Akito noted that it was Coil, a quiet place, everything matching the map. Iris, spotting a person, got excited and urged them to talk. Dismounting from the horse, she approached and politely asked if this was Coil. The man stared at her for a moment and asked if they were travelers, then wondered what brought them here. Akito stepped in and claimed they were envoys from Marishia with a message for Lord Doug. Iris looked at him in confusion, but Akito insisted and asked the man to take them to Doug. The farmer, now smiling, admitted he was just a farmer and didn't know much himself, but directed them to the village chief. As they entered the village, Akito noticed the older, weak people around them and commented on the gloom, observing that everyone looked dead inside. He murmured that it wasn't just the people but the entire area steeped in magic, specifically Doug's, which should not have been possible. He asked the farmer if that manor up there was Doug's, and the man confirmed it. Akito mentioned the rumors about no one returning from the place and asked if they were true. The farmer dismissed it as an old tale, explaining that the mountain path was dangerous and that it was probably something parents used to scare children. He declared the land peaceful and credited Doug for it, calling him their savior. Akito fell silent until a commotion erupted nearby, with two people arguing. One accused the other of not honoring their reward agreement, while the other shouted back, saying they hadn't done anything anyway. Akito observed the scene and noted they were adventurers, realizing they were not the only outsiders. The farmer grew nervous and warned that causing a ruckus was a bad idea because they would come. Akito, confused, asked who they were. Suddenly, a giant creature appeared and slammed both fighters on the head, lifting them effortlessly. Akito gasped in shock, asking what the hell that thing was. The farmer explained with a chuckle that it was the territory's guardian, a golem, and added that Lord Doug didn't use human guards but kept the peace with autonomous golems. Akito, watching the creature march off, realized they were fully independent constructs and Doug had actually finished them. The ground cracked beneath the golem's steps, and Iris, stunned, asked where they were taking those two. The farmer replied that they were headed to Doug's manor to be sent to the correction facility. Iris screamed in disbelief, and the farmer calmly explained that Doug believed all human conflict stemmed from mental defects, so he treated people to correct their minds. Ever since Doug took over, the land had remained quiet, and the villagers viewed him as their savior. Iris suddenly shouted for Akito to look behind him. He turned to find multiple giant golems carrying villagers, including crying children. Iris, horrified, cried out that even the kids were being taken. She urged Akito to move, saying there was no time to hesitate. Akito clenched his fist tightly as she called his name again. He murmured in disbelief, questioning if this was where Doug's research had led. Then, filled with rage, Akito shouted Doug's name and declared he wouldn't forgive him. Without hesitation, they rushed toward the manor. They were moving deeper into the jungle, following the line of golems as Akito and Iris trailed silently behind. Akito narrowed his eyes, thinking something was off. They had been following them for almost an hour, but there was no sign of oil trails or forest disturbance. That bastard Doug must have set something up. He glanced back at Iris and asked quietly if she was all right, but she suddenly burst out, demanding to know why he hadn't helped the children immediately, her voice trembling with emotion. They had been taken, and they had no idea what could happen to them. Akito gritted his teeth and snapped that he understood what she was trying to say, but insisted that his top priority was revenge on the 5 great nations. If they had caused a scene saving those kids in a village full of Doug's lackeys, they would have blown their cover, and if word spread, things would get messy. For now, getting to Doug's manor came first. Iris stayed silent, then asked bitterly if that meant those kids could just suffer. Akito responded with conviction, telling her to trust him that he would save the children and wasn't going to lie about it. But this was a rare chance, and after they subdued Doug, they could help everyone. He asked if she still had a problem with that. Iris hesitated, then began to question if Akito was being serious when suddenly he froze, eyes widening in shock. Before them stood a cluster of golems, silent and unmoving. In the center of the forest clearing was a strange stone slab. Iris, puzzled, asked why there was a slab in the middle of the jungle. Akito reached out and touched it, remarking that it wasn't metal or stone. It felt different. Iris suddenly shouted his name, and he called back, asking what was wrong. She replied that the number of golems seemed fewer and that she couldn't see the villagers either. Akito spun around, realizing she was right, and cursed under his breath that he had looked away for just a second and they had lost the trail. Turning back to the slab, he muttered that it seemed to be pumping strange magic into the air and decided it was worth testing. Placing his hand on it, he shouted that there were enough of them around that breaking 1 or 2 shouldn't matter, but when he pulled his hand back, there wasn't even a scratch. Iris pointed out that brute force wouldn't work, and Akito admitted it was time to step back and observe. There had to be some kind of trick. Iris stood silently, watching as one of the golems approached, bringing a villager with him. The golem covered its ear with one hand and then stepped into the slab, which began to shift and shimmer. Iris gasped, shouting that the slab was turning into a gate and maybe it led straight to the manor. Akito agreed but questioned how to activate it. Suddenly, a scream rang out. Akito turned quickly to see a golem holding 2 children as they cried out for help. Iris, horrified, screamed for Akito to do something. He hesitated, thinking that if he helped now, they might lose the trail, but this was getting too dangerous. With a sudden surge of energy, he lashed out with his rope punch, striking the golem's head and shattering it. The children fell from its grip, but before the body could collapse on them, Akito dashed forward, scooping them out of harm's way. He glanced toward the slab and saw a teleportation circle briefly flash and vanish, realizing he had seen what looked like a manor on the other side. He shouted to Iris to get the kids somewhere safe. She asked what he would do, and he replied that he would distract the golems. Once their focus was on him, the rest could escape. A blast erupted near him, and Iris screamed his name in fear. She turned to see all the golems converging on them and panicked, muttering that they were in trouble. In a sudden blur, a rope punch whizzed past her side and smashed into a golem's head, the rope retracting instantly back to Akito's arm. He smirked, saying that he had had enough of being dragged around and that his patience was gone. Staring at the constructs, he declared that these clay dolls were about to be swept away before he dealt with Doug. The golems began shooting energy beams from their single glowing eyes as Iris grabbed the children, urging them to run and follow her quickly. Akito fought fiercely, hurling and punching with blinding speed, his rope strikes shattering their limbs and torsos. Iris glanced back in awe, thinking his strength was incredible, but he was getting too fired up and wasn't paying attention. One golem rose silently behind him, its eye glowing ominously. Akito shouted as it launched a concentrated laser beam directly toward Iris and the kids. The children screamed as the blast neared, but Iris stepped in front of them, yelling for them to look out just as the beam struck her squarely. The impact sent her flying as she collapsed to the ground. The children, stunned, rushed to her side and begged her to hang in there while she coughed and screamed in pain. Akito stood frozen in disbelief, unable to process what had just happened. Then his eyes locked on Iris bleeding on the ground, and he screamed her name in rage and anguish. Akito and the kids froze upon seeing Iris's condition, and Akito immediately shouted her name. His voice strained as he cried out, "How did this happen? I thought you were hiding," then dropped to his knees beside her, clutching her gently while shouting for her to hang in there, swearing that he would fix this, cursing under his breath that she was losing too much blood. As one of the kids cried from behind, saying through tears that their sister tried to save them, sobbing uncontrollably. Akito's eyes widened as he grabbed her and shouted that they were pulling back, that they would get her to town and find a doctor, while Iris, barely conscious, looked at him and murmured an apology, saying she guessed she messed up. And Akito shouted back not to say that, insisting she would be fine, that it was just a scratch. And she gave a faint smile, thanking him but saying she was not going to make it, that she could tell her own body best. Then whispered, "Hey Aki, sorry I wasn't much help," as her breathing quickened. Akito grew increasingly panicked, thinking damn it Iris, while she urged him to take care of the magic prosthetics, not to push himself too hard and to eat properly, making him promise. And he kept shaking his head, saying hey over and over until she closed her eyes and he screamed her name, shouting for her to open her eyes, his voice breaking as he thought why did this happen, blaming himself, thinking he should have forced her to stay at the base, that he got reckless and stopped protecting her, that it was all on him, begging her not to die and not to leave him alone, then started repeating no in pain, shouting in agony as golems began approaching. And he lifted Iris in his arms, screaming for Doug to show himself, demanding a one-on-one fight and refusing to let her die, telling Doug that if he had magic he should use it to save her. Then Akito would kill him afterward, his voice thundering as he called out Doug's name, and far away in the mountains a girl listened, intrigued, muttering strong. "Who the hell is he?" Then looked through her rifle telescope and smirked, saying making him Omi doesn't sound so bad, as she placed her finger on the trigger, set her position, and fired a single bullet that pierced through a golem's head right beside Akito, who turned in shock to see the golem fall, then looked up to see a girl descending through the air with her rifle, blowing a bubble from her gum and saying, "Hey, do you even understand the situation you're in?" Casually remarking that this whole place was basically Doug's backyard and yelling like that obviously drew golems, calling it pathetic. And Akito stared at her as she landed, then shouted, "Who the hell are you?" But the girl waved off his anger and replied, "Oh, relax," saying she was not his enemy, and that anyone who could take on that many golems at once had to be strong, and she would give him that. But as Akito prepared to strike her with a rope punch, she sighed and reminded him she was not his enemy. Oh, he yelled that he did not care who she was and to buzz off, that he did not have time for this. And she blew another bubble, then glanced at Iris and stated that her internal organs were wrecked, and if she did not get treatment immediately, she would never wake up, asking if he had noticed the magic covering the forest that made it nearly impossible to get out, saying he would never make it to the village in time. And with time running short, she offered him a deal, saying if he helped her with a little favor, she would save Iris. And Akito, desperation in his voice, asked if she was not lying, and she stood near a stone slab and declared that, for her, impossible did not exist, then introduced herself as Isis al-Rashid, the last remaining alchemist in the world, and something sparked at her fingertip as she added that a deal was a deal. And in a manor somewhere distant, Doug worked inside a chemical lab that had been converted into a house. And inside a glass chamber lay Iris with Akito and Isis watching her, and Akito whispered her name, his heart heavy with guilt, thinking this was all his fault, while the children hid nearby watching him, and he clenched his fists, remembering his promise to Crest that he would protect her, swearing he would not let her die, his eyes shifting to the machines and pods, realizing that the strange gadgets and the life support pod confirmed that Isis was the eccentric magic tool maker, and he thought he did not care how it happened as long as it saved Iris, then turned to Isis and asked if Iris would survive. And she calmly replied that as long as she stayed in the pod, she would not die. But if they did not act, she would remain that way forever, shocking Akito, who grabbed her by the shoulders and shouted that she said she would save her. But she turned to him and said unless he had a saint like Flora, no one could regenerate crushed organs, and he slowly released her as she added that he knew she was right, and he pleaded with her, asking her to tell him what to do, falling to his knees and crying, saying if she died. And Isis held his face, smiling and saying that face, she loved that expression. And as she grinned, Akito looked scared and confused, and she whispered, "Come here, big sis will comfort you," prompting him to shout what the hell and to let go, while she laughed and told him to relax, reassuring him that the girl would live, claiming to have something as powerful as a saint's miracle, the elixir whose recipe was written in her forbidden grimoire, but that it had been stolen, and she no longer had it. So sweetly informed him that she needed him to retrieve it from Doug's grand library. And Akito wonders what's hiding in the alchemist's room. He thinks she called herself an alchemist. Could she be another reincarnator like him? Just then, Isis walks in, saying it looks like they're stuck with each other now. If they're going to work together, let's at least start with proper introductions. She introduces herself as Isis al-Rashid and asks his name. She says she's after the forbidden grimoire that Doug stole from her. Akito introduces himself when she tells him not to be shy and to help himself with some sweets. Akito thinks that name sounds familiar. He then says she's the one who made those magic tools, and she asks if he bought her inventions. She says she's thrilled. She knew someone with taste would recognize her genius. She tells him not to hold back and say what he loved about them. Akito thinks she's a bit much, but alchemy was once called the ultimate art. They said it could turn water into wine, stone into gold, just by following formulas. Magic couldn't hold a candle to it. Today's magic tools are basically descended from that. She says he's well informed, but the magic tools they use now are nothing but pale imitations of true alchemy. It all began 150 years ago with her great-grandfather. Their family preserved real alchemy, passing it down through generations in secret. When he asks why it was hidden, she says because power that convenient only ever leads to bloodshed. Alchemy was twisted into weapon magic. Stones turned into shells and bombs. Her ancestor was horrified by the destruction, so he vanished from the world stage and sealed the knowledge away inside the forbidden grimoire, but then 12 years ago someone broke that seal. His name was Doug. He killed her parents and took that grimoire, and she watched it happen with her own eyes. Since that day, she has dedicated her life to two things: revenge on Doug and reclaiming the grimoire. She hid as a magic tool crafter to survive and prepare, but when she saw Akito tear through Doug's golems, she knew it. She needs his strength to defeat him. Akito thinks she has a grudge against him too, doesn't she? When he says, so that's why she approached him, she replies that's her whole story. She asks him to help her get the grimoire back, and in return she'll brew the elixir to save his friend. He thinks that explains everything. Her ancestor was probably a reincarnator or maybe an engineer or military scientist. He brought modern science to this world and became the founder of alchemy, which explains why her tools feel so off. She inherited the knowledge, but not the intent. That reincarnator fused science with magic and created a whole new overpowered tech system. So in that case, just then, he rushes towards her and grabs her by the neck, asking if she minds explaining this. He says, look, he can't be sure. Her whole grimoire story might not even be real. She could be lying just to use him. So here's the deal, he'll help her, but in return, she's saving Iris. No exceptions. She says, fine, deal. If he ever suspects she's lying, then kill her on the spot, but stop crying already, she says, patting him. Afterward, as they're walking, Akito asks what's the plan. How do they get inside Doug's lair? She tells him they don't. He's surprised, and she explains that lair is a decoy. Use the regular gate and he'll just get dumped into a trap. When he asks what they do instead, she says they use her gate link. Connect this to a gate and they'll be sent to the real destination. A gate appears and he says, think of it as a portable router that hijacks the signal. As they walk inside, he says it's pitch black in here. She tells him to be patient a bit longer and then they arrive. She tells him this is Doug's true lair. He looks at it, saying Doug built this huge underground complex. She explains that not a single human lives here. Nadir Jana, everyone who moved in is a golem, which means intruders are immediately detected and eliminated. Suddenly, the alarm goes off. She says her weapons are useless if the golems get too close, and her flying tools can barely hover. That's why it's his time to shine, he should go nuts. While he keeps the golems distracted, she'll sneak into the Grand Archive and retrieve the grimoire. She then gives him a hand grenade. When he asks what it is, she tells him it's a magic stone bomb. He says that's basically a grenade. She explains she overcharged a stone with magic using alchemy until it turned volatile. Just pull the pin and toss it, simple, but he seems awfully familiar with these. He says it was just a lucky guess. She tells him whatever, take her design. Then she asks if he's ready. He agrees, thinking of Iris, hang in there because he will save her no matter what. Isis tells Akito she wants him to hit the golem production facility and wipe it out to weaken their forces. There's also a magic supply system keeping the golems running, and she wants it destroyed completely. He asks why, and she tells him in the meantime she'll infiltrate Doug's Grand Archive. His job is to stir up enough chaos to keep them off her back. That factory is rigged with alarms, so once he's in, the golems will come non-stop. Akito says, so he's just bait. That's really nice of her. She says that's why she dragged him into this. He jumps away, saying let's just make sure they don't drag each other down. He arrives at the facility, looks around, and notices a bunch of golems. He says so that's how they're supplying magic to the golems. He takes out the grenade, saying perfect, let's test this out, and pulls the pin. A huge explosion occurs. He thinks that's impressive. This is the kind of stuff packed inside the forbidden grimoire. If this knowledge spreads, it will only lead to more bloodshed. No wonder Isis's ancestor wanted it sealed away. Just then, more golems appear. He says but he'll use whatever he has at his disposal as he runs toward them. Another huge explosion occurs. Isis sees it and says he's causing quite a ruckus. That's good, that's exactly what she needs. Now she can move freely. Using her visor, she looks at the tower, saying there's the central tower. It's connected to the ceiling of the Grand Archive. 2 guard golems are posted at the entrance with a few more patrolling nearby. There's no way she can force her way in like this. Most of the patrol is moving away toward the main corridor. She says Akito's doing a solid job distracting them, but something is descending from the upper floor. That must be him. She looks and sees Doug. She thinks she was shocked when his body suddenly turned younger, but there's no mistaking it. She saw him creating those golems. He cannot fool her eyes. He had the forbidden grimoire in his hands. Suddenly, Doug looks her way and she gets shocked. She quickly hides, thinking he saw her from that distance. No way, that's impossible. Then Doug creates a space and disappears. She looks again and says he's gone. Meanwhile, Akito is walking into a room. He looks around, saying, "What the hell is this place?" These pods, they look like the ones back at Isis's house. Should he destroy them just in case? Then he notices a human inside one pod. He says, "What's this?" The human is breathing. He thinks they're alive, more than just being kept alive. He looks at the other pods. Every one of them is filled with people, and their brains have been removed. These are the people of Coil. This isn't the work of someone sane. Just what the hell is Doug planning? Either way, he will kill him. Suddenly, he notices a child crying. The child is begging someone to help him. Akito walks over, saying there's no way, there shouldn't be any living humans here. He asks the child what he's doing in a place like this. The child says he was brought here by Lord Doug, and then they tried to experiment on him, but he barely escaped. Akito thinks a runaway, that's great. Bad timing, but he might know something useful about Doug. He'll take him somewhere safe and get answers later. He tells the boy he's coming with him. The little boy asks if he'll really help him. Akito agrees, telling him not to leave his side. Just then the boy grins and thanks him when suddenly Akito gets stabbed. He screams and falls to the ground. Then Doug says he's still as soft as ever, isn't he? Akito looks at him, thinking he let his guard down. He didn't think the brat was an enemy, but he's bleeding badly now. Just then Doug reveals his true form, telling him he's still as naive as ever. Akito gets surprised when he looks at him, thinking that smug expression, that foul magic radiating from him. Different body or not, he's Doug. Doug gets surprised, saying so he figured it out. That's impressive, he'll give him that, but as expected of the former hero. He should come now, there's no need to stand around here, so follow him. If he wants to kill him, he'll hear him out first, won't he? He opens a door and both of them arrive at an open place. Akito quickly drinks a potion, thinking the wounds are deeper than he thought. He needs to heal at least a bit. Doug asks if he's feeling any better. Akito tells him to shut it, saying bold words are coming from the guy who just stabbed him. He then thinks the wounds aren't healing fast enough. If they fight now, he'll be at a disadvantage. He needs to stall him. He then asks about the bodies, the ones without brains. They were villagers from his land, weren't they? Doug agrees, telling him he extracted their brains and transplanted the neural circuits into golems. With a direct magic feed, they operate flawlessly. Akito says he's not even human when Doug tells him he has it backwards. They paid taxes without question, obeyed him without thought, and even volunteered themselves and their families for his so-called correctional facility. What else would he call them if not livestock? They stopped being human long before he did. Doug then asks Akito why he isn't attacking. Isn't this his chance? That's what he's thinking, right? He then says relax, he's not here to fight, he came to negotiate. Akito asks, negotiate. Doug says in truth, he owes him some thanks. His cheat ability helped him complete many of his experiments, but he still needs one final piece to finish his grand design. He should join forces with him. Akito gets surprised. He asks what the hell he's babbling about when Doug says it's not a bad deal. Together, they could eliminate the remaining heroes easily. Akito says he'll betray them just like that. Doug says it's not betrayal, it's just the end of a mutually beneficial arrangement. Benefit is logic, and logic leads to truth. Cast emotion aside, and he will reach the unwavering. Akito thinks finally the bleeding stopped. He says they all know he's alive, don't they? Doug says of course, Flora summoned him the other day. Akito says so he knows about Xiaolong too. Doug says more or less, but that's irrelevant. Now everyone's after the ring. He then asks Akito, he has it, doesn't he, so he should hand it over. That's the price of his partnership. Hearing that, Akito jumps toward him, asking him not to give him that logic crap. He's been spewing nonsense non-stop. Thanks to that, he had time to heal, so now die. Doug uses his ability, Blessings of Magic, and then disappears, saying so negotiations are off then. Two golems appear, and Doug says very well. Then he'll be taking everything from him. He'll peel apart his brain and extract every secret at his leisure. On the other hand, at the Grand Archive, Isis walks inside, saying finally she made it this far. But this is bad. Finding the grimoire among these thousands of tombs would be impossible without preparation. Luckily, she came prepared. She takes out a magic compass, saying she made it to react to the grimoire's magical signature. With this, she won't get lost. Just then, the alarm starts beeping, and she says there's no time to waste. The needle isn't pointing to anything obvious. Without this, she'd be lost combing through shelves, so that leaves that door. Just as she touches the door, suddenly a magic formation appears, and she gets surprised. She looks at it, thinking a magic circle trap. Jackpot. A magic circle trap disarming method is that some or all of the symbols in the circle are scrambled on purpose. To disable it, they must rewrite the symbols into a completed formation. Naturally, this requires advanced magic theory, but enter the wrong symbols and the circle will misfire. Still, that's fine by her. Magic circles are an alchemist's bread and butter. Let's see whose craft reigns supreme. She tells Akito, once she has the grimoire they're pulling out. Doug tells Akito, his blessing of magic ability, he heard it lets him imbue magic into weapons and armor. In his hero days, he compressed vast energy into a sword and unleashed massive slashes. But he has studied that ability and discovered something far greater: control of magic itself. That's the true nature of his cheat ability. Whether it's someone else's magic or a monster's, he can reshape it and command it at will. Behold, he says, his elite golem army, each crafted with a monster brain, battle-hardened, custom-built. Akito is struggling against the golems when Doug says it's originally meant for a future war against the heroes, but Akito will make a perfect test subject. The golem attacks Akito, who thinks its physical strength is off the charts, and with the blessing of magic on top of that, it's unstoppable. This is the result of mastering cheat abilities, and this is the logical conclusion. Akito falls back, and Doug says now let's get him to his lab and crack open that brain. Once he's done with him, he'll be begging to serve him. After a while, Akito opens his eyes and looks around, wondering where he is. He sees himself being carried and thinks that's it. He must have blacked out. He tries to move his body but realizes it won't respond properly and his magic output is a mess. Did he hit him with some kind of paralytic poison? A door opens and he sees a room. He wonders if this is Doug's lab, thinking he'll end up just like the villagers at this rate. He would rather die than become a puppet, so he needs to figure out some way to escape. Just as Doug is about to cut open his head, Akito suddenly calls out, asking what the hell he's playing at, treating people like toys. He demands to know the point of all this when Doug says, so he's awake. He then asks what Akito will do now that he knows he'll be joining them soon enough. Doug says he has no interest in chatting with corpses, when Akito says he'll kill him himself. Doug tells him not to bother since his special paralytic poison is already coursing through his veins. He can't move a finger, and even if he could, what would he do in this state? Just then, Doug notices Akito's finger twitching and sees a cable running from it. Akito says that's right. At this point, moving even a finger is about all he can manage, but he knows one finger is all he needs to take him down. Doug looks at him when Akito pulls out all the pins from the grenades and a huge explosion occurs. Akito is blown outside, but Isis grabs him and protects him from falling, saying he's alive but badly hurt and asking what happened to him. She then looks at Doug, who shielded himself with some kind of barrier. She thinks that if he's this close, she could take a shot with her gun, but the situation is too risky. It's a rare chance to get this close, but healing Akito comes first. She has to pull back for now. Doug looks at them, wondering who they are before sighing and thinking that was definitely a magic stone bomb. Why does Akito have that? He thought he disposed of all those engineers, but now he wonders how Akito even got into this garden. He must have had help. Someone who knows how to use magic stone bombs and who knows about this garden. So it's true that there's an intruder in the Forbidden Archives. One of that clan survived. Everything makes sense now. He starts giggling, saying so that's how it is. He missed one after all. Perfect timing. Now he'll wipe them all out in one go. On the other hand, Akito is sitting when Isis tells him she has set up a perceptional blocking magic circle. They should be safe for now. She then looks at his condition, saying him surviving those wounds makes her wonder if he's even human. She says it's creepy, he's kind of freaking her out. Who's the real monster here? He tells her to shut up, asking more importantly if she got the grimoire. She agrees and shows it to him. He says thank God, that means Iris can be saved, but she tells him to forget that for now and focus on this. She forcefully feeds him something and he coughs, asking what the hell that was. She asks if he's feeling better now when he tells her to give him a break. Even he can tell this isn't the kind of wound a potion can fix. She asks if it didn't work, when suddenly he looks at his arm and says it worked, asking why. She tells him of course it did, that was an elixir. She found several in Doug's archive along with the grimoire. When he asks why waste that on him, she tells him to relax because there are a few to spare. At least this proves the real deal works. He tells her to quit using him for her test runs and also says he picked this up when it fell. He gives her back her arm when she says it's pretty banged up. He then says if it's just this, Iris can fix it in no time, so for now they should head back. He feels angry, thinking what a mess. It's the second time he's almost been killed by the same guy. Can't believe Doug mastered his cheat ability to that extent, but at least now he knows his tricks. The first priority is his golems. Isis notices he's fired up again. She then looks outside, and when he asks what's wrong, she tells him this is bad. The gates, the golems smashed them all. He asks if they spotted their entry point when she tells him it looks that way. He's planning to trap them in here. Akito says he's got to have his own private way out, so maybe, but it's still obviously a trap. He'll be waiting for them. Akito says that's fine, this time he's going to win. She says if he's serious, then she has an idea. Lend her his right arm. He gives it to her, and she says she may not be an expert in magic prosthetics, but she's still a magic tool engineer. She might be able to fix it. She then tells him it looks like they're stuck here, so their fates are linked. Let's take down Doug together. He then tells her there are golems wandering all over the place. It's only a matter of time before they find them, asking if she's sure she can really fix it. She tells him to hold on because she needs to see the inside first. Since magic tools and this arm work on the same principles, she should be able to handle a simple repair, and he doesn't need to be so tense. With the recognition blocking magic circle, nobody outside will sense they're here. Just then, she feels something when he asks what's wrong. She asks what this is while looking at his arm, asking if that girl really built it. He agrees, asking if something's wrong when she tells him wrong isn't the word. Magic prosthetics are already incredibly complex as it is, but to have all these functions running at once, this is insane. She has woven the magic circuits together like a network so precise, so intricate, it looks like a gemstone crystal. She then asks if this is a relay drive circuit using magic stones. She has never seen one actually working before. How can a kid create circuits this beautiful? This is the very pinnacle of craftsmanship, an absolute masterpiece by a girl so young. There's no doubt that kid is a genius. Akito thinks about Iris thinking a genius. He then asks if she can fix it or not when she disagrees, saying this is way beyond anything she can handle. He asks what, saying that's not an option when she tells him to relax, saying it's just a severed circuit here. If she reconnects it, it should at least work for now. He says, well, that's a relief when she says that's only if it were that simple. He asks why not when she tells him the problem is this line uses mithril. He asks mithril when she says he really doesn't know anything, does he? Mithril is an ultra-rare metal with the highest affinity for magic. Its conductivity is said to be dozens of times higher than pure silver, but all known mineral mines have long since dried up. These days they can only get it by salvaging relics. In other words, rare, expensive, and definitely not something she can just grab right now. He thinks that's why Iris kept calling him a rare metal. Just then, he spits out something, telling her here when she asks if that's a ring. He tells her he hid it in his stomach so Doug wouldn't steal it. That's about the only valuable thing he has left. She tells him to let her see it. She says, incredible, this ring is made of mithril, asking where he got something like this. She then says he mentioned hiding it from Doug. What does he mean? He thinks he's got no choice. Her hatred for Doug isn't fake, so if they're going to work together, he tells her everything even about his days as a hero. She says so that's how it is. She never would have guessed he's the hero who defeated the demon lord. He asks if she believes him when she tells him if anything, it explains a lot. No normal person could be that strong. He says, and as a fellow transmigrant, it explains why she picked up his story so fast. His only goal now is to exact revenge on Doug, when she says it looks like they're after the same thing then. She then says in that case she will use his ring, but it might cost him his cheat ability. He says he can't afford that. She tells him it's either his cheat or his arm, so pick one. He thinks, what does he do? He absolutely needs his cheat to survive in the future, but if he dies here, none of it matters. Right now, surviving comes first, no matter what. He then grits his teeth and asks Isis to take the ring. Just then, something suddenly hits the wall and both of them are surprised. Golem soldiers appear, and he says they weren't going to leave them alone forever. One of the golems attacks when Akito dodges, telling Isis he will buy her time, so use the ring and fix his arm. She asks if he's sure about this when he agrees, saying there's no point saving his cheat if he dies here anyway. She agrees and starts working while Akito fights the golems. As he is fighting, she calls him and then throws the arm to him. Akito grabs it and attacks the golem, thinking it works. It looks like Isis's emergency repair job is good enough. Just then he gets surprised, thinking what's this feeling? His strength is coming back. No way. By integrating the ring directly into the circuit, magic prosthetic times grace of power. As he throws the golem far away. He then says, all right, it's time to take back everything they stole from them. Looking at his strength, Isis says, incredible. That was some ancient firepower. She can't believe he was hiding this kind of strength, so why didn't he use it from the start? Just then he disagrees, saying this is his cheat ability, grace of power. He never thought he would get it back. She says it really is a miracle. He gets surprised, asking if she just smashed the material and connected it into the circuit, when she says she might have lost his power entirely, but realized there was alchemy involved in this. It was a snap decision, but she thought, what if she could merge the power sealed in that ring directly into the circuit? She adjusted the process and put her own spin on it, and luckily it was a huge success. Just then he tells her not to use his arm for her experiments when she says, but it worked out, didn't it? He says, well, he's not totally convinced yet, but she saved him. She asks if there are no problems with his restored power when he says there's a bit of a strange feeling, but he has always been an all-out attack type anyway. There's no big deal. She says, good. In that case, let's stick to the plan and find a way. Just then Doug says, not so fast. It looks like the rats that kept hiding have finally come out. Akito asks Doug where he is hiding. Isis tells him it's a wide area voiced golem when Doug says it seems he has teamed up with that petty thief of an alchemist. She will pay for stealing the forbidden text and the elixirs. Isis snaps back, petty thief. That was her family's legacy, how dare he? He tells her to quit hiding and show himself, calling him random insults. Doug says the fact he thinks those childish insults are clever is what's really annoying. Come to these coordinates, the escape gate is at the top of the tower. Isis says it's obviously a trap, he's mocking them. Doug says he will be waiting for them there as well. Let's see how long they can keep running, he will see them soon. The golems arrive, and Akito says it looks like they have no choice. Whatever trap is waiting, he will smash right through it. Isis says someone's confident and then tells him Doug is there. The central area is an open terrace, so if they go straight, they can shortcut most of the way. He agrees, telling her let's go. A golem blocks his way when he uses his grace of power and beats it in an instant. Afterwards, he asks if they just climb up from here. Isis tells him that's the idea, but be careful. Who knows what kind of trap he has set for them. Just then, Akito thinks something's off. Doug could have killed them any time, so why is he deliberately revealing his location? What's he planning? Suddenly a blast occurs and a missile appears. Akito looks at it, wondering what that is when Doug appears and says they made it. Always building some crazy contraption, isn't he? Isis says that's the ultimate weapon she saw in the forbidden text. This has the power to rule the world. Akito says this is what they call a ballistic missile. Doug asks if it has a name. He'd been searching for one, so mind if he uses his. He says he embedded a S-rank monster's magic stones into both the warhead and propulsion unit, creating a long-range weapon with the power to reduce entire cities to ashes. It's strange. It covers the entire continent. When the Great War between heroes breaks out, the instant it begins he will fire these weapons at every major city. Hearing the plan, Akito asks if he's insane, he will slaughter countless innocents. Doug says with his preemptive strike they will be powerless. He will destroy everything as he pleases. This is his key to ruling the world. Akito thinks he's even more dangerous than he imagined. Doug with modern machinery is the absolute worst combination. Just then Doug directs one last question at Akito. Will he come to his side? If he joins, he can do as he pleases with those traitors. Wouldn't he love to see them grovel? Akito thinks, not until he sees them atone with his own eyes. He wants them to pay for what they did. Akito then steps up and kicks down the weapon, telling Doug not to get the wrong idea. The ones groveling will include him and every last one of them. Hearing this, Doug says some people only learn by dying, he supposes. Fine, this time he will make sure Akito stays dead, and he will be thorough. Doug uses his ability message from Shemua when he channels the ring's power and creates a hole, attacking Akito. Akito dodges the attack, and Doug says he dodged, but those vines will chase him forever. Akito starts dodging the vines, telling Isis to stay back, when Doug says the vines won't stop growing until they fill this entire space. Akito struggles, and Isis says that's not good, while Doug declares there's nowhere left to run. Just then, Akito uses his blessing of power, Stella Blade, breaking the vines and surprising Doug. Doug gets down, saying Akito regained his blessing of power. He then asks how the hell he broke his secret spell. Akito tells him that's not what matters right now. He points at him, saying next is him. It's time to take back the power he stole. Doug then uses Blade, saying very well, he will get a bit serious. He fires a blade toward Akito, who dodges it. On the other hand, Isis thinks, as she suspected, unless they break Doug's absolute defense, they can't win. She will have to use her secret weapon. She just hopes it actually works. She takes out a bullet, loads it into her weapon, and says she has no choice. Meanwhile, Akito struggles, thinking it's so damn persistent and there's no opening to counterattack. Just as he tries to escape, a magnetic field appears, trapping him. Doug asks how about that. Now he's completely helpless. Suddenly, Isis takes aim. Doug notices and scoffs, asking if she really thinks that kind of thing will work now. But then she points her weapon at Akito. Akito looks at her, asking what she's doing as she fires at him. Doug, shocked, asks if she's lost it, shooting her own ally. But Isis calls out to Akito, explaining Doug's magic is magnetism. He forms an intense magnetic field with mana to manipulate iron sand. She has enchanted Akito's arm. Doug says, what? Akito suddenly appears behind him and attacks, but Doug blocks. However, Doug's counterattack fails, leaving him surprised. Isis explains demagnetizing shot, a magic bullet that instantly reverses and neutralizes the polarity flow of Doug's magnetic field. That's her secret weapon, perfected after years of studying his magic. She tells Akito it will nullify Doug's magic temporarily, so finish this. Doug scoffs, asking if he really thinks he can beat him with such a cheap trick. He calls on the golems to come, but Akito tells him he's already forgotten how he uses his blessing of power. Doug looks surprised. Akito declares convert all mana into pure physical power, no tricks, just brute force. He then uses his skill, Terrent Stampede. Doug tries to block the attack as dust and debris erupt everywhere. Akito breathes heavily. Isis asks if they got him. Akito tells her not to jinx it. Doug isn't the type to go down that easily. Stay sharp, they're going in. Just then the ground breaks and a massive golem emerges. Doug says, forcing him to use his last resort. Let's call this the start of overtime. He then appears in his final form. A huge explosion occurs as Doug laughs, telling them to tremble before him. This is his final form, his message from Shemua. Behold the Tetragrammaton. Both Isis and Akito stare at him. Doug tells them to struggle all they want. Now that he has taken this form, there's no way insects like them can defeat him. Akito says he's the one who stopped being human. Just then, some orbs emerge from Doug's form, surprising Akito. Doug declares that he is a god and then uses his ability, Kaminaru. Electricity spreads everywhere. Akito dodges it, thinking that long-range support unit is a problem. Isis warns him to be careful. This is not the same monster they fought before. Suddenly, Doug attacks Isis and Akito shouts for her. Akito thinks they can't drag this out. That means he has to finish it up close in one shot. As he runs forward, Doug attacks again, but Akito dodges and leaps into the air. Doug looks at him, calling him a bug skittering around, while Akito thinks it's over. He uses his ability, Blessing of Power, Tyrant Stampede once again, but he gets shocked when it barely does any damage. He thinks, what the hell? It won't pierce. There's no way some dumb rock wall is stopping this. Suddenly, he realizes it's repairing faster than he can destroy it. Just then, the orbs appear again as Doug unleashes the same ability. Akito dodges once more. Doug says so he's figured it out, no matter how much he attacks, it's meaningless against the Tetragrammaton. Doug explains he is fused with the tower, which supplies him with infinite magic from the city itself. The source of that power is the townsfolk. Only someone like him who has mastered cheat skills could pull this off. His ultimate armor, capable of infinite regeneration, is on another level. Right now, Akito is fighting alone against the magic of 1,000. This fight is his. From afar, Isis looks at him, thinking if she backs off, that laser will get her, but if she closes in, she can't break through his defense. How do they win this? On the other hand, Akito suddenly starts running. Doug frowns, wondering if this is a desperate last-ditch charge as Akito begins attacking different parts of his body. Doug gets annoyed, asking what he's trying to do, calling him a persistent pest. He tells Akito it's useless. His attacks are too weak, they repair in a second. As Akito falls back, however, he notices something. One part of Doug's body is repairing slower. So that's the spot, he mutters. Doug looks startled, saying, what? He refuses to believe there's a weak point. But Akito explains since Doug's body is fused with the tower and he's using the ring to drain magic from the townsfolk, the real problem is Doug himself. Doug's eyes widen in shock as Akito says he doesn't have the power or the experience to control this much magic. That flaw, that's the weak point. And he's about to hammer it with everything he's got. Doug snarls as Akito mocks him, calling himself a god in front of the former hero who defeated the Demon King. Don't make him laugh. He's nothing but a crusty old man wearing new skin. Enraged, Doug roars, but Akito strikes, breaking through and tearing apart Doug's arm. Akito seizes the ring, got it back. His cheat skill. After a moment, Isis tells Akito he really did it this time. He nods, saying he's taken back the ring Doug stole. She breathes a sigh of relief, thank goodness. Now let's follow the plan and begin the escape, but suddenly a thorn pierces her and she screams. It won't come out. She cries as Akito turns in shock toward Doug. Though injured, Doug smirks, declaring they're not getting away. Akito tells him to give it up already, it's over. He can't win without the ring, but Doug snarls back. Silence, he will not lose. He snaps his fingers and a missile appears before them. Akito says a ballistic missile. What is he planning to do? Doug replies that he's going to blow them all away, including the entire area. Akito thinks to himself, evil never goes down without a fight, while Isis keeps screaming in pain. Akito calls out to her when she tells him the thorn won't come out so easily. Akito then says Doug's planning to blow himself up along with them, but Doug laughs along with them. That's a foolish move only desperate fools make. He can move freely underground with earth magic, so the only ones getting blown away are them. He sinks into the ground. Akito says he's not getting away and attacks, but fails to hit him. He then calls out, demanding to know where Doug went. Isis shouts at Akito to run, saying there's no time. She tells him it sucks, but the only option now is to escape. Akito says he gets it. Somewhere on this floor is Doug's gate. Isis tells him to find it and use the ring she gave him before they came here. Get out even if it's just him. Akito asks if she's telling him to leave her behind, demanding what about Iris. Isis answers if both of them die, then who is going to save her? Akito is stunned. She tells him he can't lose sight of his real purpose, and besides, she already got back at Doug a little, so she's satisfied. She trusts that he will be the one to avenge her as she lowers her gaze. Akito tells her not to decide that on her own. She looks at him in surprise. He says he's a former hero, remember, once someone is right in front of him asking for help, he's not the kind of guy who turns his back on them. So leave it all to him. She stays quiet, then smiles, saying then she's counting on him. He nods in agreement. Meanwhile, Doug watches them, saying this is the perfect seat to witness their final moments. He'll give them a moment to say their goodbyes. He snaps his fingers. Akito quickly tells Isis to grit her teeth. Doug says, let's do this, it's over. Akito grabs her and yanks her out. She screams as blood gushes from her hand. The missile follows them. Akito tells her to hang in there as he starts running. Doug laughs, saying they can run but cannot hide. Akito sets Isis down, telling her to stay there. He'll heal her later. He turns to leave and she asks what he's trying to do. She says it's too late, they won't make it. Akito asks if she didn't say to trust him. Just as the missile approaches, Akito jumps straight toward it, shocking everyone. He thinks back, was it on a war special he saw on TV years ago? A missile's warhead explodes when its detonator is triggered. There are different types of detonators with different activation mechanisms, but this world doesn't have electricity or radar. That means the only likely trigger is a contact fuse that detonates on impact. In other words, as long as the fuse isn't activated, the warhead won't explode. He thinks everything up to this point is part of the plan. Maybe punching this big hunk of metal in the gut will set it off, but he's betting it won't. He screams and punches the missile, turning it back. The missile changes course. Akito shouts, go get him. The missile heads toward Doug. Why, this can't be. Doug cries. Outside the city, a huge explosion erupts. Villagers ask if it's an earthquake. They see it's coming from the Lord's mansion when suddenly the entire ground blows up. Afterward, inside the house, Isis opens her eyes. She sits up and sees Akito sleeping in a chair. Looking at her healed hand, she notices an elixir lying on the table. She realizes he used one on her even though so few were left. Akito wakes up. What's going on, he asks. She leans close to his face and says, too bad, he's awake. She was going to doodle on his face. He asks how her body is. She tells him she's fine, but he's the one all beat up. Then she asks about Doug. Akito tells her Doug is dead. He saw it with his own eyes. He looks down. Isis shrugs and says, well, whatever. She's over him. He's just a guy from the past. He has got a different mission now. She hands him an antidote, telling him to go see her, the one he truly wants to save.